As I shuffled into the worn courtroom, my son smirked while my daughter-in-law gave me a contemptuous look. But the moment his eyes met mine, the judge suddenly went pale. His hands trembled, his gaze locking onto the Y-shaped scar on my palm as he whispered, "My God, is it really him?" My son's smirk instantly vanished. The entire courtroom turned to stare in stunned silence. Not a single soul had any idea who I truly was. Thank you for being here with me today. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment. Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone in your own family? Your answer matters. Just a quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection, but what matters most is the message at the heart of it. When I shuffled into that Burlington courtroom wearing my worn boots and gripping an old cloth hat, my son smirked. My name is Floyd Harrington, 72 years old, and I stood there in clothes meant to humiliate me. Faded flannel shirt, scratched work boots that had seen 40 Vermont winters, denim gone pale from washing. Garrett. My son, 42 years old, sat at the plaintiff's table in a suit that cost more than my pension. Corporate attorney, successful, everything I'd hoped he'd become. He whispered something to the woman beside him. Simone, 38. My daughter-in-law of 10 years smiled at whatever Garrett said. That cold, calculating expression I'd failed to recognize for too long. She wore pearls and a charcoal dress that belonged in Manhattan, not Vermont. Their lawyer shuffled papers with the confidence of someone who'd already won. I kept my head bowed, hands trembling just enough. The old farmer, the confused widower, exactly what they expected. Judge Theron Lockwood, 55, presided from the bench with practiced neutrality. He glanced up routinely as I shuffled forward, just another case on a Monday morning docket. Then his face changed. My right hand gripped the old cloth hat loosely, the Y-shaped scar fully visible against the courtroom's fluorescent light. I hadn't worn gloves. I hadn't tried to hide it. Some evidence is best presented without ceremony. Color drained from his cheeks. His hand reaching for the gavel froze mid-air and began to tremble. His eyes locked onto mine, not with detached assessment, but with stunned recognition of someone seeing a ghost. "My God," he whispered, barely audible. "Is it really him?" Garrett noticed. His smirk faltered. Simone's eyes narrowed, darting between Lockwood and me, calculating. I said nothing. Let them wonder. The bailiff announced the case. Emergency conservatorship. My supposed mental incompetence. The words washed over me like wind through bare branches. Lockwood's hand still trembled. 25 years had passed since Boston. Since the courthouse hallway. Since the knife. He would remember. They had no idea who I truly was. Not until this moment. Simone leaned toward Garrett. "Look at him. He doesn't even know where he is." I let my eyes go unfocused. Let my weight shift. Give them what they expect. But Judge Lockwood saw something else. Something that made his knuckles go white against the bench. The lawyer began his opening. Cognitive decline. Financial irresponsibility. The need to protect an elderly man from himself. I stood there, hat in hand, the picture of decline. A 72-year-old apple farmer who'd lost his wife and was losing his mind. Every word a lie. Every gesture calculated. Burlington County Superior Court, with its Vermont marble and high windows letting in winter light. I'd been in 1,000 courtrooms. This one was different only because I stood on the wrong side. Lockwood cleared his throat, found his voice. We'll hear arguments. Counsel proceed. But his eyes kept returning to my face, to my hands, to the Y-shaped scar on my right palm. He knew. The question was what he'd do with that knowledge. But let me take you back to where this nightmare truly began, 3 months earlier, on a Thursday afternoon that seemed ordinary. November 2024. The maples along our property line had turned that deep crimson that means snow is coming. Nora had always loved that color. She'd been gone 2 years, but I still looked at those trees through her eyes. I walked down the gravel driveway to the mailbox, cold wind cutting through my jacket. 3 in the afternoon, temperature already dropping toward freezing. The orchard stretched behind me, 12 acres of apple trees I'd planted with Nora 40 years ago, plus the maple forest that had been in my family for 80 years. The mailbox held the usual collection: utility bill, agricultural newsletter, and a red envelope marked Final Notice. County Tax Assessor, Burlington, Vermont. I opened it, standing there in the cold wind scattering late leaves. Property tax delinquency, $47,000. Imminent foreclosure proceedings. 15 days to remit payment, or the county would begin seizure. I read it 3 times. My hands didn't shake, not yet. That would come later when I needed them to. $47,000. I had transferred exactly $47,000 into Garrett's account 5 weeks earlier. Clicked the confirm button on my online banking while sitting at my kitchen table on an October Tuesday. I remember every number. I've never forgotten a number in 30 years. Garrett had called that Monday. Said the property taxes were due. He'd been helping me manage paperwork since Nora died, since everything got too complicated for me to handle alone. Said he'd take care of it if I transferred the funds. Easier that way. One less thing to worry about. I'd sent it the next day. $47,000. Routing number 0114-01533. Account ending in 7249. Confirmation code TON RX-4892-VT-20241008. Every digit sharp in my memory like fresh-cut glass. And now the county was threatening to seize the home Nora and I had built. The orchard we'd tended through 40 winters. The maple forest her grandfather had planted. How long had Garrett been planning this? The wind picked up, carrying the scent of approaching snow. In the distance, faint traffic sounds from Route 7. Everything looked the same: the orchard, the mountains, the November sky going gray. But nothing was the same. I folded the red envelope, slid it into my jacket pocket, and walked back toward the house. The maples along the property line stood bare against the November sky. Nora had always loved that color, deep crimson before the first snow. I needed to hear Garrett's voice when he explained this, and I needed to hear it soon. I walked back inside and dialed Garrett's number from the living room. The foreclosure notice lay on the coffee table beside the fireplace. Red letters, stark against oak. 4 rings before he answered. Background noise immediately washed through music, overlapping conversations, the sharp clink of glasses. A Boston restaurant. Weekend crowd. Dad! His voice carried that edge of irritation at interruption. What is it? The county sent a foreclosure notice, I said, keeping my tone measured. Property taxes. They're saying $47,000 is overdue. Pause. Not the pause of surprise, the pause of calculation. Dad, calm down. It's just a clerical error. The county is notoriously slow updating their records. I reached for the black leather notebook I kept in the side table drawer. Started writing. Date. Time. Exact words. I sent you that money 5 weeks ago, I said. October 8th, the full amount. And I paid it, Dad. Same day. This is just typical government incompetence. Don't stress yourself. The music swelled behind him. Someone laughed. Ice rattled in glasses. The notice says 15 days until seizure proceedings. You're mistaken as always, Garrett said, voice hardening slightly. I handled it weeks ago. Look, I'm at dinner. I'll come up this weekend and we'll straighten this out. Explain it properly so you understand. Mistaken as always. I wrote the phrase in the notebook, underlined it. How many times had he used it this year? I thought pen still against paper. Saturday, I said. Right. Saturday evening. Don't do anything until then. Don't call the county. You'll just confuse things worse. The line went dead. No goodbye. I sat there holding the phone, the fire crackling in the stone fireplace Nora and I had built 32 years ago. Outside, darkness had settled over the orchard. November cold pressed against the windows. Mistaken as always, I flipped back through the notebook. Found it in September, twice in August. Once in July when I'd questioned a bank statement discrepancy Garrett claimed to have handled. 30 years in courtrooms had taught me to recognize patterns. The way witnesses built scaffolding of small lies before constructing the larger fiction. The particular rhythm of evasion. I put down the pen and stared at the notebook. 30 years of recording. Lies had taught me to recognize the cadence of deception. Garrett arrived Saturday evening at 6, Simone beside him in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly pension. He wore a tailored suit despite the weekend hair, perfect everything about him, projecting success and control. I'd made coffee, set out Nora's good cups, played the role. Dad. Garrett sat across from me, foreclosure notice now in his hands. This is exactly what I told you. County error. Look, see this processing date. That's after I submitted payment. Their system is a mess. He pointed to dates and codes that meant nothing. Spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to being believed. I can show you the canceled check Monday, he said. Prove the payment went through. Thank you. I let my hands tremble slightly around the coffee cup. I was worried. Of course you were. Simone leaned forward, her voice soft with practiced sympathy. That's completely understandable. Getting a notice like that must have been terrifying. She glanced at Garrett. A look passed between them. He gave a small nod. Actually, Dad, there's something we need to discuss. Simone set down her cup. Something that's been worrying us for a while now. I waited. Let silence do its work. When I stopped by Wednesday, you remember to drop off those apples from the farmer's market. The gas stove was on. I kept my face neutral. On. The burner was turned to high. No flame, just gas pouring out. Her eyes were wide, earnest. Dad, the entire kitchen smelled like a leak. I had to open every window. If I hadn't been there. She let the sentence hang. Garrett picked up the thread seamlessly. You could have died, Dad, or blown up the entire house. Do you remember turning it on? I let confusion cloud my features. Let my gaze drift to the cold fireplace. I don't. Wednesday. This is what we're talking about. Garrett's voice carried that blend of concern and frustration. These lapses. They're becoming more frequent. Simone reached across to touch my hand. We're not trying to upset you. We love you. But we're scared. What if next time I'm not there? What if you hurt yourself? I looked down at her hand on mine. Perfectly manicured nails. 3-carat diamond catching lamplight. I removed all the gas lines in March 2022. I thought letting the truth sit cold in my mind, while my face showed only elderly confusion. Switched to induction cooktop the month after Nora died. Couldn't bear the smell, reminded me of her cooking. There is no gas stove. There hasn't been for nearly 3 years, but I said nothing. Just nodded slowly, brow furrowed as if trying to recall a memory that didn't exist. Maybe you're right, I murmured. I've been forgetting things. Relief flickered across Simone's face. Too quick, too eager. How long had they been building this narrative of my supposed decline? Garrett stood. We should let you rest. But Dad promised me you'll be more careful. Maybe it's time we talked about getting you some help around here. Someone to check in. Make sure things are safe. Someone to monitor me, I thought. I'll think about it, I said aloud. They left 20 minutes later, Simone's cashmere coat swaying as she walked to their Lexus. Garrett's hand possessive on her back. I watched from the window as red taillights disappeared down the gravel drive. Then I walked to the kitchen, stood in front of the induction cooktop. 4 burners, ceramic surface, electrical cord running to the wall outlet. No gas connection. No gas lines. Hadn't been since March 14th, 2022, when the contractor completed the conversion. I had the receipt in my filing cabinet. Date stamped, detailed. Simone had described the gas leak that never happened with perfect conviction. The smell, the open windows, the terror of discovery. Not a mistake, not confusion. Deliberate fiction. I looked at the empty kitchen November darkness pressing against the windows and understood with the clarity that comes from decades of watching people lie under oath. This wasn't confusion. This was a plan. Understanding the plan was one thing. Turning it against them was another. Simone arrived the next morning before Garrett earlier than I expected, carrying a small amber-colored bottle that caught the pale Sunday light through the kitchen window. 8 o'clock. I was making coffee, the kitchen still cold, despite the radiator's steady hiss. "Good morning, Dad." She set her purse on the granite counter, pulled out the bottle with practiced casualness. "I brought you something." Garrett was still upstairs. I could hear his footsteps on the old floorboards overhead. This was deliberate, Simone alone, the intimate moment, the daughter-in-law who cared. She placed the bottle beside my coffee cup. No pharmacy label. Just a commercial brand name I didn't recognize embossed on white plastic. Inside, white capsules caught the morning light. "The doctor said this will help with the memory issues, Dad. Natural supplement, completely safe. Just one in the morning, one at night." I picked up the bottle, turned it in my hands. No prescription information. No dosage warnings. No physician's name. "What doctor?" I asked, keeping my tone mild, confused but cooperative. "Dr. Morrison. Family medicine. Garrett made you an appointment last week, remember? You were having trouble with the gas stove. We thought it would be good to get checked out." No appointment. No Dr. Morrison. Another layer of fabricated history. "Right," I said slowly. Let uncertainty cloud my eyes. "I thought that was that Tuesday, Thursday, Dad." She poured herself coffee, completely at ease. "You were worried you'd forgotten, but I drove you myself. Don't you remember the waiting room, the magazines? Building the narrative. Specific details. Making me doubt my own memory." I unscrewed the bottle cap. Shook one capsule into my palm. Unmarked. Generic. "Could be anything." "That's thoughtful of you," I said. "I appreciate you looking after me." Simone smiled. Genuine warmth. Perfect performance. I raised the pill to my lips, swallowed it with lukewarm coffee. "I need to know exactly what they're giving me," I thought, feeling the capsule slide down my throat. "The evidence in my blood will tell the truth. You need to understand I wasn't being naive. I was being strategic. 30 years prosecuting criminals had taught me that proving intent requires evidence. Claims can be denied. Suspicions dismissed. But blood doesn't lie. Whatever was in that capsule would remain in my system for days, weeks maybe. Measurable, provable. Evidence that couldn't be explained away as clerical error or elderly confusion. So I took 4 more over the next 2 days. Monday morning with breakfast while Simone watched. Monday evening when Garrett brought them with dinner. Tuesday morning when Simone called to remind me. Tuesday afternoon when Garrett stopped by unexpectedly. 4 pills total. Enough for comprehensive blood analysis. After that, not one more. Monday afternoon, while they thought I was napping, I used my old tablet, the one I kept in the office, disconnected from the home network, to research the brand name. Basic search first. Nothing concerning on the surface. Vitamin supplements, cognitive support marketed to seniors. Then I went deeper. Cross-referenced the manufacturer. Looked up ownership structure. Found 3 FDA warning letters about contamination and undeclared ingredients. I pulled up files from cases I'd prosecuted decades ago. Pharmaceutical fraud. Controlled substances disguised as supplements. The patterns were familiar. The keywords matched. Whatever was in those capsules wasn't vitamin B12. Tuesday night after Garrett left, I crafted a small pouch from a piece of old leather wallet Nora had given me 40 years ago. Cut it to fit in my palm. Soft enough to be silent. Dark enough to be invisible. Then I practiced. Pill under tongue. Fake swallow. Coffee sip. Subtle cough into handkerchief. Spit pill into handkerchief, transfer to palm, slip into pouch. Natural movements. Nothing theatrical. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and did it 20 times. Watched my own face. Adjusted the timing, the angle, the hand position. 20 times until the motion was invisible even to me. Wednesday morning. Simone brought the pill bottle again. I went through the routine. Pill to mouth. Coffee. Cough into handkerchief. Pill safely in the leather pouch in my cardigan pocket. She smiled, satisfied, and left. 20 minutes later, Garrett arrived. Just checking in, Dad. He walked through the house with that casual authority, touching things, straightening frames, opening cabinet doors. Then he went to the bathroom. I heard the toilet lid lift. Long pause. Water running. Lid closing. He came out looking satisfied. Just making sure the pipes aren't backing up, Dad. Old houses, you know. Sometimes things don't flush right. He's not checking pipes. I thought, keeping my expression neutral. He's checking whether I'm spitting out the pills. Thursday morning, same routine. Simone with the pill. My performance with the handkerchief. Garrett 40 minutes later. This time I watched him from the hallway. He lifted the toilet lid, peered into the bowl, checked behind the tank. Even opened the cabinet under the sink, looking for pills, for evidence I wasn't complying. Friday afternoon he came by again. Third visit this week. Pipe still good? I asked from the kitchen. Yeah, Dad, all clear, just being thorough. Thorough. I stood in front of the mirror that evening, practicing the motion for the 20th time. Hand to mouth, subtle cough pill into handkerchief until it was invisible even to me. Because now I understood the full scope. They weren't just giving me pills to make me sick or confused. They were monitoring whether I took them, checking the toilet, watching my compliance, building a system to ensure I ingested whatever poison they'd chosen. Which meant whatever was in those capsules, they needed me to take it consistently. Needed the effects to be measurable, observable, documentable, and that made it evidence I could use against them. 3 visits in 1 week. The same excuse each time, the same practiced casualness. I understood now this wasn't caregiving. This was surveillance. And surveillance required a subject who didn't know he was being watched. But evidence required more than collection. It required performance. Wednesday morning, I let my hand tremble while pouring coffee, the first visible symptom Simone would report to Garrett by noon. She watched from across the kitchen counter, her expression carefully neutral. Professional concern masking satisfaction. Are you all right, Dad? She moved closer. Your hand. Fine, fine. I set down the pot with exaggerated care. Let the tremor linger an extra second. Just the cold. November always makes the arthritis worse. But we both knew it wasn't arthritis. I'd spent Tuesday night studying medical books from my library texts on Parkinson's progression, early-stage dementia presentations, drug-induced movement disorders. 40 years of prosecuting cases had taught me that witnesses who study their roles perform better. I practiced in the bathroom mirror. The subtle hand movements, the momentary confusion crossing the face, the slight delay before responding to questions. Nothing theatrical, just enough to be noticed. Thursday morning, I asked Garrett about the property taxes, then asked again 10 minutes later, watching his eyes light up. We discussed this on Monday, Dad. Remember, did we? I let uncertainty cloud my expression. I thought that was that yesterday? He exchanged a glance with Simone. Victory passing between them. Friday afternoon, I spent 20 minutes searching for my reading glasses while they sat at the kitchen table. Made a show of checking coat pockets, looking under newspapers, retracing steps. The glasses were in my desk drawer. I'd hidden them there myself that morning. Simone found them on the coffee table, where she'd placed them while I was in the bathroom. Here they are, Dad, right where you left them. I could have sworn. I took them with trembling hands. Thank you, sweetheart. Every visit went into the black leather notebook. Time. Date. What they said. how they looked at each other, what they touched, where they walked. Judicial precision, the same technique I'd used recording witness testimony for 3 decades. Thursday evening, I noticed the brass key. It sat on my bedside table where I always kept it. Small, old-fashioned, opened the safe in my office closet. But something was wrong. The angle. I'd left it at exactly 45 degrees to the table edge, a habit from trial days, hotel rooms in strange cities where I'd arrange my belongings in precise patterns to detect if anyone entered while I was in court. Obsessive, maybe, but it had caught a bribed clerk rifling through my briefcase in 1987. Now the key lay perfectly aligned with the table edge. Someone had picked it up, examined it, put it back wrong. I stood there staring at that brass key, and something cold settled into my chest. Not panic, but the methodical clarity that came from 30 years of building cases against people who thought they were smarter than the system. 45 degrees, I whispered to the empty room. I left it at 45 degrees. Someone had been in my bedroom, touched my belongings, studied the key to my safe, which meant they planned to access it. Saturday afternoon, I understood how. 2 o'clock. I lay on the living room sofa, eyes closed to narrow slits, breathing even and deep. The old farmer taking his afternoon nap. Harmless, predictable, unaware. Simone arrived alone. I heard her car in the driveway, her key in the front door. When had I given her a key I hadn't? She'd made one. She moved quietly through the room. I kept my breathing steady. In, out. The rhythm of sleep. Through barely open eyes, I watched her pause. Study me, checking for any sign of wakefulness. Satisfied, she turned to my coat hanging by the door. Her movements were precise. Professional. She reached into the right pocket, she knew exactly which one, and extracted the brass key. Held it up to the afternoon light streaming through the window. Examined it. Then she pulled something from her designer purse. A small round compact. Opened it. Not makeup. Wax. Soft impression wax, the kind locksmiths use. She pressed the key into the wax. Held it steady for 3 seconds. Removed it carefully. Examined the impression in the light, turning it slightly to verify the depth. Perfect, she whispered to herself. That's all we need. Returned the key to my coat pocket. Exact position. Closed the compact. Slipped it back into her purse. 40 seconds total, start to finish. 40 seconds. I thought, maintaining my even breathing. She's done this before. Simone stood there another moment, looking at me on the sofa. Then she left as quietly as she'd come. Door closing with barely a click. I lay perfectly still for 5 minutes, counting heartbeats, making certain she was gone. Then I opened my eyes. How many times had Simone practiced that motion key, out-wax impression key back, before she felt confident enough to do it in my living room, while I slept 3 feet away? The answer didn't matter. What mattered was what came next. They had the impression. Within days, maybe hours, they'd have a duplicate key. They'd access my safe when I wasn't home or when I was sleeping, or during one of my supposed confused episodes. They'd photograph documents, maybe steal originals, build their case for conservatorship, prove I was financially incompetent, show the court I needed protection from myself. But they were building their case in my courtroom, by my rules, with evidence I would control. I stood up from the sofa, walked to the window, watched Simone's car disappear down the gravel drive toward town. The key leads to my safe, I thought. But what she doesn't know is what I'm about to put inside it. Sunday morning. I'd have Sunday morning alone. Garrett and Simone always drove to Boston on Sunday's brunch with her family, they claimed. 4 hours minimum. 4 hours to prepare the most important operation of my counterattack. I walked to my office, opened the safe with the brass key. The real documents were inside. Property deeds, stock certificates, bank records, the title to the orchard and maple forest. 40 years of financial documentation. All of it would be gone by Sunday night, replaced with exactly what I wanted them to find. I lay on that sofa for 5 minutes after Simone left, staring at the coat pocket where the key rested. She thought she'd just obtained what she needed to access my safe, the documents, the deeds, the financial records that would let them complete their theft. But she didn't know I'd have Sunday morning alone to prepare exactly what I wanted them to find. What I put in that safe would be the most important evidence I'd ever planted in 40 years. Preparing evidence is methodical work, no room for improvisation. Sunday morning 5 a.m., 2 hours before Garrett and Simone would wake, I knelt before the safe in complete darkness, listening to the tumblers click into place. No lights. My desk lamp pointed at the floor, casting just enough glow to see my hands. The house silent except for November wind testing the windows. The safe door swung open with the familiar heavy sound of German engineering. Inside, 40 years of documentation. Property deeds showing the true $12 million estate value orchard and farmland at $3 million Maple Forest at 9. Bank statements with real account numbers. Bearer bonds. Trust documents. Stock certificates. All of it had to disappear. I worked methodically. Removed the property deeds first. Set them aside. Then the bank statements. The bonds. Every authentic document that proved what I actually owned and where my money actually lived. Then I reached to the back of the safe. Found the seam most people would miss. Pressed the hidden release. The false panel swung open. The secret compartment, I thought, sliding the real documents into the space behind. Installed after the Bennington case when witness intimidation got serious. Never thought I'd use it against my own son. 20 years ago. Different lifetime, different threats. But the same principle: protect what matters, sacrifice what doesn't. I sealed the compartment, checked it twice. Invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Then I began the replacement. Fake documents. I'd spent 3 days creating them. Photocopied signatures with subtle differences close enough to look real, different enough to prove forgery under examination. Inflated property valuations showing the Maple Forest at 20 million instead of 9. Random bank account numbers that looked legitimate but led to closed accounts or other people's holdings. Generic financial statements downloaded from estate planning templates. Between the pages, I placed 3 microscopic IP trackers, each one smaller than a grain of rice. Military-grade technology I'd confiscated in a 1998 organized crime case and never returned to evidence. 3 millimeters. I thought positioning them carefully. The moment Garrett photographs these documents with his smartphone, I'll know exactly where he is. GPS coordinates, timestamp, device metadata, everything. Take the bait. Take it all. Every fake number, every inflated value. Build your fraud on my trap. I closed the safe and spun the dial, sealing the trap, like a hunter sets a snare with fresh bait and sharpened steel. First light was breaking through the office window when I finished. Garrett and Simone would be awake in an hour. I had just enough time. Monday morning, 6 a.m., I used the burner phone. Purchased cash 3 days ago at a convenience store 40 miles south. No name. No connection to my regular service. Prepaid minutes that couldn't be traced. I dialed from memory. A number I hadn't called in 15 years, but never forgot. 1 ring, 2, Frost. The voice was crisp. Military discipline that never fades. Irving Frost, 68, my former military colleague from the Judge Advocate General's Corps, and now owner of a private toxicology lab in Albany, answered on the first ring with the crisp tone of a man who'd never lost his field surgeon discipline. Irving, it's Floyd Harrington. I need anonymous toxicology work. No records, no system entry. Silence for exactly 2 seconds. Calculation happening. Floyd, 30 seconds, who's the threat and what's the timeline? I gave him 5 emotionless sentences. Son and daughter-in-law administering unknown substance. Disguised as brain supplement. Need blood analysis and pill identification. Cannot use local facilities where my son might have connections. Need it done off the books. When can you get here? Irving asked. Tuesday. Early morning. Bring the full bottle. I'll run degradation analysis. If someone's been altering the dosage, the compounds will show variation patterns. Altering the dosage. I hadn't even considered that possibility. But Irving was right. If Simone was escalating the amount, trying to speed up whatever effects she wanted, the pills themselves would show inconsistency. Evidence I hadn't thought to look for. 4 hours each way, I said. Mountain roads, no highways. Avoiding plate readers, Irving said. Smart. What vehicle? 98 F-150. No GPS. Good. I'll have the lab clear from 6 to 8 a.m. Come to the service entrance. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. Old signal from our JAG days. Some habits never die. Irving, you prevented my court-martial in '87, he said. I've been waiting 37 years to clear that debt. Tuesday morning, don't be late. The line went dead. For the first time in days, talking to Irving, I felt something other than cold calculation. I felt the faint pulse of hope that I might actually survive this. I stood at the office window watching November dawn paint the maple forest orange and gold. Nora had loved this time of morning, the way light caught the leaves before they fell. She'd stand right here with her coffee, planning the day's work, deciding which trees needed attention. 2 years gone. Sometimes it felt like yesterday, sometimes like decades. I wish you were here, I whispered to the glass. You'd know what to do. You always knew. But Nora wasn't here. Just me. An old man fighting his own son with tools from a lifetime of prosecuting criminals. The irony would have made her laugh. Then she would have told me to stop being melodramatic and focus on the work. I set the burner phone in the desk drawer, covered it with old tax returns. The plan was complete. Fake documents in the safe waiting for Garrett's duplicate key. Real documents hidden where he'd never find them. IP trackers ready to ping the moment he took photographs. Blood sample and pill bottle ready for Tuesday's drive to Albany. 4 hours through Vermont mountain back roads. No highways. No automated license plate readers. No electronic trail. Leave at 5 a.m., arrive in Albany by 9, back home by 2 p.m. before Garrett's usual afternoon surveillance call. No room for error. One mistake and the entire operation collapsed. Desmond's technical team had already positioned thermal imaging sensors in the maple tree line the previous afternoon, disguised as weather monitors covering every approach to the farmhouse. I set the burner phone down and looked out at November dawn breaking over the maple forest. Tuesday morning. 4 hours of mountain roads. One chance to get this right. Perfect timing requires perfect execution. No second chances. Tuesday, 5 a.m. The old Ford's engine growled to life in darkness so complete I couldn't see the maple trees 20 feet from the barn. 1998, F-150. No GPS, no OnStar, no electronic tracking of any kind. The only vehicle on my property that couldn't tell anyone where I was going. I'd left my main phone on the kitchen counter. Deliberately. Visibly. If Garrett checked and he would check, he'd see it there. Assume I was home, assume I was compliant and confused and going nowhere. The burner phone sat in my jacket pocket. Only connection to the outside world. Complete isolation. I thought pulling out of the barn into November darkness. If something goes wrong on these mountain roads, no one will find me until spring. The risk was acceptable. The alternative was worse. I took Route 7 south through sleeping towns Middlebury, Brandon, Rutland. No highway patrol at this hour. Just darkness and falling snow that had started 20 minutes into the drive. At Rutland, I switched to Route 22, a crossing into New York. Back roads from there, Granville, Cambridge, small towns I'd driven through decades ago on trial circuits. Roads that didn't have automated license plate readers. Routes that left no digital trail. The temperature dropped to 15 degrees. Snow thickened. Windshield wipers fought ice that built up faster than the truck's failing defroster could melt it. I drove with one hand scraping the inside of the windshield with the other to maintain visibility. 4 hours of white-knuckle mountain driving through a snowstorm in a truck old enough to vote. 9 a.m. Exactly. I pulled into an industrial park on Albany's south side. Unmarked building. Gray metal siding. No signs. Nothing to indicate what happened inside. Irving met me at the side entrance before I knocked. Inside, he said. No greeting. Pure efficiency. The lab was sterile and bright after 4 hours of darkness. Medical equipment I recognized from old cases. Some I didn't. I handed him the blood sample, self-drawn with old medical supplies from Nora's nursing kit, the one she'd kept from her years as a registered nurse. 10 milliliters in a sealed vial wrapped in aluminum foil to prevent light degradation. Then the amber pill bottle, half full, 15 capsules remaining. Irving held the vial up to the light. Examined the blood for clotting or separation. Blood sample looks clean draw. I'll run the full panel toxicology compound analysis dosage accumulation. 24 hours. He opened the pill bottle, shook one capsule into a sterile tray, cut it open with a scalpel. White powder spilled across the metal surface. Compound looks pharmaceutical grade, he said more to himself than to me. Not street quality. Someone with medical access. Simone. Her charity work at the regional hospital. The connections she'd mentioned casually over Sunday dinners. Access I'd never questioned. I shook Irving's hand and felt something I hadn't felt since Nora died. The steadiness of someone who wouldn't betray me, wouldn't lie, wouldn't sell me out for money. Go, Irving said. Don't push your timeline. If you're late, they'll know. 9:17 a.m. Garrett's Tuesday surveillance call came at 2 p.m. like clockwork. 4 hours, 43 minutes to drive 4 hours home. No margin for error. The return drive was worse. Snow had accumulated. Roads that were merely dangerous at dawn were nearly impassable by mid-morning. I pushed the old truck to its limits on curves I could barely see, praying the tires would hold, praying the engine wouldn't quit praying. I wouldn't meet a logging truck coming the other direction. No traffic. Complete isolation. Just me and Vermont mountains, and the very real possibility of dying in a ditch because I'd gambled everything on one covert operation. 1:55 p.m. I pulled into the farmyard with the truck engine still running, frost coating the windshield from the failing heater, hands so cold I could barely feel the steering wheel. 5 minutes. 5 minutes before Garrett's call. I killed the engine and ran. Actually ran something I hadn't done in years, across the yard toward the farmhouse. My breath came in white clouds, legs screaming from 4 hours cramped in the truck. The phone was ringing as I reached the door. I let it ring. Forced myself to pause. Breathe. Slow my gasping. 5th ring. I picked up. Hello. My voice came out exactly as I needed it. Tired, slightly confused, the voice of a man who'd been napping in his chair all afternoon, not racing through a snowstorm to deliver evidence to a secret laboratory. Dad! Garrett's voice carried that edge I'd learned to recognize. Suspicion dressed as concern. Did you take your morning pill? You need to stay consistent with the regimen. Yes, I took it. I let exhaustion leak into my words. Not fake, the adrenaline crash was real. My legs feel so heavy today. Everything feels slow. That's normal, Dad. The supplement takes time to work. You're adjusting. Adjusting to poison, he meant. I wanted to let you know I'm bringing someone this weekend. Garrett's tone shifted, falsely bright. My familiar doctor. He wants to do a proper assessment of your cognitive function. Make sure we're managing your condition correctly. Familiar doctor, not a doctor. Not a legitimate assessment. A paid professional. Someone Garrett had already briefed, already convinced, already compensated to sign whatever diagnosis they needed. How much had Garrett paid this familiar doctor to sign whatever diagnosis they needed? That's good, I said, injecting gratitude into my voice. I appreciate you looking after me. Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Make sure you're rested. The assessment can be tiring. The assessment that would declare me incompetent. Provide medical justification for conservatorship. Give them legal cover to seize control of my estate, my decisions, my life. I'll be ready, I said. Good. Love you, Dad. The line went dead. I stood in the kitchen, hands still trembling, not from the performance this time, but from the cold drive and the adrenaline and the understanding of what Saturday meant. Familiar doctor meant someone Garrett had already paid, already briefed, already convinced to sign whatever medical declaration they needed. They weren't just poisoning me anymore, they were building an official medical record of incompetence. And when Irving's test results came back in 24 hours, I'd know exactly what weapon they'd been using to destroy my mind. 24 hours can feel like a lifetime when you're waiting to learn how someone's trying to kill you. Wednesday, 10 a.m. The burner phone vibrated against the desk, Irving's number exactly 24 hours after I'd handed him the blood sample and pill bottle. I picked up on the first ring. Irving, Floyd. His voice carried that crisp military precision that meant bad news delivered with absolute clarity. I have your results. You need to hear this sitting down. I was already sitting, had been since 9:30 waiting. The pills aren't supplements, Irving said. They're haloperidol, industrial-strength antipsychotic medication, designed for acute schizophrenia, violent psychotic episodes, triple therapeutic dose. I wrote the word in my black notebook. HALOPERIDOL, letters sharp and precise. For a healthy man your age, Irving continued, this is chemical warfare. Creates artificial symptoms that mimic late-stage dementia. Generalized tremors, profound disorientation, severe short-term memory blockages, overwhelming lethargy that traps you inside a failing body. Every symptom I'd been performing. Except they wanted them real. The dosage, Irving said, and his voice went harder. Floyd, at this concentration, the cardiac arrest risk for anyone over 65 is catastrophic. You're 72. You're in the maximum danger zone. I kept writing. Medical terms, numbers, evidence that would stand up in court. There's more, Irving said. The extra tests I ran, I analyzed all 4 blood samples you provided chronologically. The ones you took before you stopped. 4 samples. 4 pills I deliberately swallowed to create evidence. She's been escalating the dosage systematically, Irving said. First sample shows baseline concentration. Second sample is 15% higher. Third sample, 35% higher. Fourth sample, 50% higher than the original. I stopped writing, the pen frozen against paper. That's not medication error, Irving said. That's not negligence. That's deliberate, methodical poisoning with calculated escalation. She's been increasing the concentration each time you took one, testing to see how much you could handle before you collapsed. And I wrote down the word haloperidol in my black notebook, the letters sharp and precise, the same notebook I'd used to record testimony from murderers and embezzlers for 30 years. Now I was recording evidence of my own poisoning. Legal implications, Irving said, his voice going cold. This isn't assault anymore, Floyd. This is attempted murder through pharmaceutical means. The escalation pattern demonstrates premeditation and increasing lethality. Any prosecutor would upgrade the charges immediately. Attempted murder. My daughter-in-law. My son's wife. The woman who'd called me dad for 10 years. Timeline? I said. My voice came out steady, clinical. The same tone I'd used questioning hostile witnesses. If I'd kept taking them. Irving exhaled. At the current escalation rate, I calculate 10 more days before cognitive damage becomes irreversible. The haloperidol would have restructured your neural pathways permanently. You'd actually have the dementia they're pretending you already have. 10 days to permanent brain damage. And beyond that, I asked. 20 days, Irving said quietly. 20 days before fatal cardiac event becomes statistically inevitable. Your heart would give out. The medical examiner would call it natural causes. 72-year-old man with documented cognitive decline and movement disorders. No one would question it. 20 days. That's all the time they'd given me to live. They gave me a death sentence disguised as vitamins, I said. Yes, Irving said. And they expected you to take it willingly. Thank them for it. Die confused and grateful that your family was trying to help. I looked out the office window. November sun breaking through clouds over the orchard. The same view I'd had for 40 years. The same trees Nora and I had planted together. They wanted to take this from me. Wanted me dead or institutionalized so they could sell every acre, pocket every dollar, erase every memory of the life Nora and I had built. The documentation, I said. Can you certify it? Already done, Irving said. Complete toxicology report. Chain of custody documentation. Blood analysis with temporal progression. Pharmaceutical identification. Dosage calculations. Legal affidavit with my license number and lab certification. It'll stand up in any court in the country. Send it to this address. I gave him a P.O. box number I'd opened 30 years ago for sensitive trial documents. Never closed it. Old habits. Floyd, Irving said, and his voice shifted. Less clinical, more personal. This is attempted murder. You need to involve law enforcement. Today. I will, I said. When the time is right. When I have everything I need. How much more do you need? They're trying to kill you. I need to know the full scope, I said. How many people are involved? What documents they're preparing? When they plan to file? Right now I have proof of poisoning. I need proof of conspiracy. Silence on the line. Then Irving's military training kicked in. He understood tactical thinking. How long before they realize you stopped taking the pills? He asked. They're monitoring, I said. But I'm performing the symptoms they expect. As long as I act sick enough, they won't know. And Saturday's fake doctor visit. I'll be sick enough to convince him too, I said. Let them think they're winning. Let them get confident. Confident people make mistakes. 10 days until irreversible damage, Irving said. That was if you'd kept taking them. You stopped after 6 days. How do you feel? I considered. The exhaustion was real. 4 hours of mountain driving, the adrenaline crash, the stress. But the tremors I'd been performing were fake. My memory was sharp, my thinking clear. I'm functional, I said. The 6 days did damage, but nothing permanent. Get the blood work done again in 2 weeks, Irving said. Make sure the compound is clearing your system. I will. Irving's voice went quiet, waiting for my reaction to the timeline he'd just calculated. 10 days until irreversible cognitive damage. 20 days until cardiac arrest became statistically inevitable. I looked at the calendar on my desk. I'd been taking the pills for 6 days before I started spitting them out, which meant I had 14 days left before Simone and Garrett expected me to be mentally incompetent or dead. 14 days wasn't much time, but it was enough to build a case if I had the right help. I dialed Desmond Whitfield's private line immediately after hanging up with Irving, the only attorney I trusted who could recognize what was coming. Desmond Whitfield, 65, the elite civil attorney who'd battled me across courtrooms in the 1990s and earned my respect through sheer relentless competence, answered his private line on the second ring. Judge Harrington. His voice carried surprise. It's been, what, 5 years? 7, I said. And I need everything you have. Off the books. Time sensitive. The surprise vanished. Pure business. Talk. I gave him 5 critical points in the methodical prosecutor cadence I'd refined over 30 years. Confirmed haloperidol poisoning at triple therapeutic dose with systematic escalation proving attempted murder. Witnessed my daughter-in-law making wax key impression to access my safe. Planted fake documents with IP trackers as bait. Required covert technical surveillance team for evidence capture. Needed Captain Kendrick Stafford of Vermont State Police coordinating field operations. Desmond listened without interrupting. Old trial habit, 10 seconds of silence after I finished. Processing. Then his voice went cold. Conservatorship fraud, he said. Emergency ex parte order. They'll file to strip your rights before you can defend yourself. I've seen this pattern 3 times in elder exploitation cases over the past decade. Timeline, I asked. You have 2 weeks maximum before they file. Maybe less if they're moving fast. Once that emergency order hits you, lose everything: bank access, property control, legal standing. The court appoints them as conservators, and you become legally incompetent overnight. 2 weeks. Matched what Irving said about the poisoning timeline. They'd coordinated it perfectly. I need surveillance team forensic accountants, and I need it off the books, I said. They're 2 moves ahead, and I'm running out of time. Where are you filing when this goes hot? Desmond asked. Not Burlington County. Garrett might have connections in local court. Smart. Federal jurisdiction then. Elder abuse across state lines, your son's in Boston, the poisoning originated there. That gives us FBI involvement if we need it. Desmond's voice carried the same cold precision I remembered from trials 3 decades ago. The tone of a man who'd just seen all the pieces of a criminal conspiracy fall into place. I'll bring my forensic team, Desmond said. If your son's venture capital firm is a shell hiding debt, we'll crack it open and expose every fraudulent transaction. Bank records, shell companies, hidden assets, everything. I have physical evidence ready, I said. Toxicology reports, blood samples, the pill bottle, recorded conversations. Good. Keep gathering. The more we have when we strike, the faster this ends. Saturday they're bringing a fake doctor, I said. Garrett's familiar doctor for a cognitive assessment. He'll sign whatever they pay him to sign. Let him come, Desmond said. Perform for him. Give them what they expect. Then we'll use that fraudulent assessment as evidence of conspiracy. That's what I thought, Floyd. Desmond's voice softened slightly. This is going to get ugly. Family cases always do. Are you prepared for what comes next? I looked out the office window at the maple forest. Nora's trees. They tried to kill me, I said. I'm already prepared. Thursday morning, I walked the maple forest, maintaining my routine property inspection. The performance for anyone watching. November cold had settled in hard. Frost on the ground. Bare branches against gray sky. My breath visible in white clouds. North boundary, I found them. 3 survey stakes. Bright orange reflective tape. Technical identification codes. Positioned in a precise line along the forest edge. I knelt down, examined the closest one. Corporate logo stamped into the metal tag. Boston Mineral Holdings, LLC, permit number 847-VA-T. Installation date November 23 days ago. These weren't prospective surveys. These were ownership markers. I pulled out the burner phone. Photographed each stake from multiple angles. The logo, the permit number, the survey line they created. Then I pulled one stake from the frozen ground. Physical evidence. Boston Mineral Holdings, LLC. I thought, reading the tag again. Permit 847-VT. This isn't a survey. This is ownership. Garrett had sold the maple forest, 80 acres. Including the 80-year-old tree Nora planted our first spring on this property. The forest we'd tended for 40 years, worth a legitimate $9 million for timber and syrup production rights, sold to a Boston mining corporation, before the estate belonged to him. How long had Garrett been planning this, negotiating with mining corporations, signing fraudulent sale agreements, while sitting at my dinner table, pretending to care about my health? I stood there holding that orange stake, the corporate logo bright against November gray. Tried to calculate the timeline. When had he first contacted them? When had he signed? What price had he accepted? Probably a fraction of true value. Desperate sale to satisfy the Boston debt I knew existed, but couldn't yet prove. Quick liquidation of assets that weren't his. The maples. The trees Nora had loved. The forest where we'd walked every autumn watching leaves turn. The syrup operation she'd planned to pass down through generations. Garrett sold them the way you sell used furniture. Disposable. Meaningless. Just numbers on a balance sheet to offset his gambling debts and failed ventures. He sold them before they belonged to him, I said aloud to the empty forest. Because he never considered this his home. Just an asset to liquidate. Nora's tree stood 50 yards away. Massive trunk. branches that had survived 8 decades of Vermont winters. She'd planted it when we were young, when everything seemed possible, when family meant something other than legal documents and corporate theft. I walked over, placed my hand on the rough bark, felt the cold through my glove. "I won't let them take this," I whispered. "I won't let them take you." I stood in that maple forest holding the orange stake, the corporate logo still visible in the morning light. This wasn't about money anymore. Garrett had sold the maples, the trees Nora planted with her own hands the first spring we moved here, the forest that had been our retirement dream for 40 years. He'd sold our entire life together to a mining corporation before my body was even cold. By Friday evening, I knew why Garrett had sold the maples. Desmond's forensic team had the answer. Friday evening, Desmond's callback came through precisely when promised. His forensic accounting team had torn through Garrett's financial records in 48 hours. His venture capital firm is a corpse propped up by credit, Desmond said without preamble. No legitimate business operations for 3 years. It's a pure shell company, no assets, no profitable transactions. Exists solely to maintain the appearance of solvency. I opened my notebook, started writing. Total debt, I asked. $8 million. I stopped writing. $8 million. Owed to a Boston underground lending syndicate. 40% monthly interest, that's organized crime rates, Floyd. Loan shark operation. Completely illegal. The compound interest alone adds $3.2 million annually. 40% monthly. I calculated quickly. On $8 million, that meant Garrett owed $320,000 every 30 days, just in interest. Nearly $4 million a year in payments without touching the principal. Impossible to sustain, financially suicidal. How long has he been carrying this debt? I asked. 18 months. He's been paying interest only barely. Missing payments. They've been patient because he promised them the farm as collateral. The farm. My farm. Nora's orchard. The maple forest sale, Desmond continued. Boston Mineral Holdings LLC. $2.3 million for land worth $9 million. 1/4 of legitimate value. I found the contract, 60-day delivery clause. Garrett must provide all property deeds and legal transfer documents within 60 days of signing. When did he sign? I asked. 42 days ago, which gives him 18 days remaining to deliver the deeds or they collect another way. 18 days. Another way meaning, I asked, though I already knew. These aren't business people, Floyd. They're enforcers. If Garrett defaults on document delivery, they'll seize the property directly, or eliminate him and claim the estate through fraudulent death insurance. The contract specifically bypasses normal court proceedings. I set the phone down and looked at that orange survey stake sitting on my desk, the physical marker of Garrett's betrayal proof he'd sold Nora's maples to strangers before my heart stopped beating. 18 days. That's when the Boston organization would come for the farm. And Garrett needed me declared incompetent before that deadline so he could legally sign over the property, the conservatorship, the poisoning, the fake doctor assessment. All of it designed to meet an 18-day deadline imposed by violent criminals. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was desperately trying to survive his own catastrophic failure. He's drowning, I said. Yes, Desmond agreed. And he's trying to use your estate as a life raft. Problem is, he's willing to kill you to get it. Keep digging, I said. I need every transaction, every communication with the Boston organization, every document that proves this conspiracy. Already on it, Desmond said. We'll have the complete file by Monday. Saturday morning, 7 a.m. The notification came through on Desmond's encrypted tablet he'd set up in my office. IP tracker activated. Location Boston Mineral Holdings, LLC headquarters. Timestamp 11:30 p.m. Friday night. Garrett had taken the bait. I called Desmond immediately. The IP tracker pinged, I said. Friday night, 11:30. I see it, Desmond said. I heard keyboard clicking. Pulling thermal camera footage now. Your surveillance system recorded everything. 30 seconds of silence. Then Desmond's voice went cold with satisfaction. Friday, 11:45 p.m. Vehicle matching your son's registration pulls into your driveway. Headlights off. He enters through the back door using a key that shouldn't exist, proceeds directly to your office. The duplicate key Simone made from her wax impression. Safe opens on first attempt, Desmond continued. He's photographing documents, page by page, smartphone camera. Each photograph triggers the embedded IP tracker we're getting. GPS coordinates, device, metadata, transmission logs. Garrett came into my house at midnight. Took exactly what I wanted him to take. Sent it exactly where I wanted it to go. The photographs transmitted immediately to Boston Mineral Holdings. Secure server, Desmond said. Their processing department accessed them at 6:15 this morning. They're analyzing your fake documents right now, the inflated $20 million forest valuation, the random bank accounts, the generic financial statements. The mining corporation was building their acquisition case on fabricated evidence I deliberately planted. When this unravels, I said, when they discover the documents are fraudulent, they'll turn on Garrett like wolves, Desmond finished. He just committed fraud against a criminal organization. Gave them false documentation for a multi-million-dollar land deal. They won't go to court. They'll handle it their own way. Watching Garrett move through my house on thermal camera was like watching a rat navigate a maze toward poisoned cheese, completely confident, utterly doomed. Send me the footage, I said. All of it. Thermal imaging, timestamps, IP tracker logs, every piece of evidence. Already encrypted and uploading to your secure drive, Desmond said. You'll have it in 10 minutes. Floyd, this is textbook felony breaking and entering combined with fraud conspiracy. Clear documentation of midnight burglary, safe infiltration, document theft, transmission to third party. Plus the IP trackers prove he sent the documents to facilitate fraudulent land transfer. How many years, I asked. With his existing financial crimes, 8 to 12 federal. More if we add the attempted murder charge from the haloperidol poisoning. 8 to 12 years, my son. I ended the call and pulled up the thermal footage on my computer. Watched it frame by frame. Garrett entering at 11:45 p.m. Moving through the dark house with practiced confidence. Knowing exactly where the office was, where the safe was, which key opened it. Kneeling before the safe, the duplicate key sliding into the lock. Documents spread across my desk, his phone camera flashing as he photographed each page. Then packing everything back, closing the safe, spinning the dial, walking out at 12:17 a.m., completely confident he'd just secured the documents that would transfer the estate and satisfy the Boston syndicate. Completely unaware he'd just handed them proof of his own fraud. I watched the thermal footage loop one more time, Garrett closing the safe, leaving the office, walking out my back door at 12:17 a.m. He thought he'd just secured the documents that would let him transfer the estate to the mining corporation and satisfy the Boston syndicate. He had no idea he'd just handed them proof of his own fraud. Trap 1 was perfect, but I still had to survive the next 18 days while maintaining the appearance of a dying, confused old man. Surviving 18 days required documentation. Every poisoning, every lie, every moment they thought I was too confused to notice. Sunday evening, Simone arrived alone. Garrett was handling urgent Boston business, which I knew meant placating the loan sharks closing in on their 18-day deadline. 6 o'clock. She wore an expensive camel coat and carried her designer purse, all smiles and concern. "Dad, you look tired," she said, hanging the coat by the door. "Let me make you some chamomile tea. It'll help you sleep. You've seemed so restless lately." "That's kind of you," I said, moving slowly to the kitchen table. Sat in the chair, positioned to see the reflection in the glass front cabinet doors. She filled the kettle, set it to boil. Got down the good teacups, the ones Nora had collected from estate sales. I watched her back through the cabinet reflection. Clear view. Perfect angle. The purse sat on the counter beside her. She reached in, pulled out something small, amber-colored. A dropper bottle. She uncapped it, held it over my teacup, squeezed. One drop. 2 drops, 3 drops, concentrated liquid. Not pills anymore. Direct chemical delivery. She returned the dropper to her purse, poured the boiling water, stirred, brought the cup to me with a practiced smile. Here you go, Dad. Careful, it's hot. Thank you, sweetheart. I lifted the cup, let steam rise to my face, took a sip, held the liquid in my mouth without swallowing. The taste was bitter underneath the chamomile. Chemical. Wrong. Simone turned back to the counter for cookies. I leaned forward slightly, spit the entire mouthful into the cloth napkin folded in my lap, continued holding the cup as if drinking normally. Dad, I wanted to ask you something. Simone sat across from me, her voice casual, probing. Where do you keep the bank documents these days? I want to make sure everything's organized for when, well, for the future. Fishing for the safe location. Bank documents. I let confusion cross my face. I keep them. Somewhere safe, of course. But where exactly, in case something happens and Garrett and I need to access them quickly? I shook my head. Let my hand tremble around the teacup. I can't remember right now. She smiled, patient, understanding. That's okay, Dad. We'll find them. Have you thought about trust arrangements? You know, legal documents that protect your assets. Translation, have you signed over power of attorney yet? Garrett mentioned something, I said vaguely. Good. We just want to make sure you're protected. I looked at Simone through that kitchen cabinet reflection, her face the perfect mask of concerned daughter-in-law, and understood this wasn't the first time she'd done this, wasn't the first cup of tea she'd poisoned while smiling. 3 drops. Not pills anymore, concentrated liquid. She was escalating the dosage because I wasn't deteriorating fast enough. Simone stayed another 20 minutes, made small talk, asked about my health, watched me carefully for signs of the poison taking effect. I performed. Hand tremors, slight confusion, heavy eyelids. After she left, I poured the remaining tea down the sink, rinsed the cup 3 times. Then I pulled out this burner phone, texted Irving. Dosage increased. Liquid delivery method. Need time-stamped record for evidence. His response came 30 seconds later. Confirmed. Will document escalation pattern in official lab report. Critical evidence upgrading charges to attempted murder with premeditation. Monday morning, alone in my office, I opened the bottom desk drawer. The Sony digital voice recorder sat exactly where I'd left it 7 years ago. Professional-grade device from 1997. The tool I'd carried in my jacket pocket for 30 years of prosecuting criminals. 30 years of witness statements. Informal suspect admissions. Unguarded confessions that became courtroom evidence. I'd convicted dozens of people using their own recorded words. I lifted it from the drawer. Familiar weight. Familiar shape. The battery was dead. I replaced it with a fresh one from the supply I kept in the same drawer. Old prosecutor habits always have backup batteries, backup pens, backup notebooks. Pressed record, spoke into it. Test. Monday, November 25th. Recording functioning. Played it back. My voice came through crystal clear. 64 gigabytes of memory. Hours and hours of recording capacity. Perfect. I placed the recorder in my inner flannel shirt pocket. Invisible. The fabric would muffle nothing. I'd tested this placement hundreds of times during trials. Every conversation from now on would be captured. Every lie. Every threat. Every moment Garrett and Simone thought they were alone with a confused old man who wouldn't remember what they said. How many criminals had I put in prison using this exact recorder, their own voices condemning them in courtrooms, where juries heard every lie, every contradiction, every moment. They thought no one was listening. Now it would capture my own son. I stood, walked to the bookshelf, pulled down the Vermont Criminal Code 1998 edition, the year I'd helped revise it. Opened to Section 13, Subsection 2, pressed record on the device in my pocket. Read aloud, in my old prosecutor's voice, clear, authoritative, the voice I'd used delivering closing arguments to juries. Section 13, Subsection 2, Vermont Criminal Code. Intentional administration of poison or noxious substance. Any individual who willfully administers poison or other noxious substance to another person without consent with intent to cause bodily harm or death shall be imprisoned not more than 15 years and fined not more than $50,000. I stopped the recording, played it back. My voice echoed through the empty office. Professional, judicial, absolute. Perfect clarity, I thought. Every word they say from now on becomes evidence. Every lie, every threat, every fake concern, all recorded. 30 years. This recorder had helped me convict embezzlers, fraudsters, murderers. People who thought they were smarter than the system. People who thought old men like me couldn't touch them. Now it was going to convict my own son and his wife. I pressed stop on the recorder and listened to my own voice echo back. Any individual who willfully administers poison or other noxious substance to another person without consent shall be imprisoned not more than 15 years. The statute I'd read dozens of times in courtrooms was now the law that would send my son and his wife to prison. Every conversation from this moment forward would be evidence, and they had no idea I was recording every word. The voice recorder would capture their words, but I needed their actions on camera too. Tuesday night, 11 p.m. My burner phone vibrated with Kendrick's signal. Ready, 5 minutes. The surveillance team was approaching through the darkness. I turned off all the lights, waited by the back door. 5 minutes later, 3 shadows crossed the yard. No flashlights. No sound. Professional. Captain Kendrick Stafford, 48 of the Vermont State Police, led his 2-person technical team through my back door with the silent efficiency of someone repaying a 15-year-old debt. No greetings, no small talk, pure business. They carried unmarked black duffel bags, military-grade equipment, the kind that doesn't appear on any official inventory. Kendrick pointed to the living room fireplace. His team moved. 25 minutes. That's all it took. Recording devices installed behind the fireplace mantel. Area never inspected. Perfect concealment. Wired into the house electrical system so they'd never need battery changes. While Kendrick's team worked inside, Desmond's people had been in the maple forest that afternoon. Thermal cameras disguised as weather sensors attached to 4 tree branches. Complete perimeter coverage. Main entrance. Back door approach. Full driveway. Maple forest boundary. Every angle covered. No blind spots. Kendrick handed me an encrypted security tablet. Showed me how to access the feeds. I checked each camera. Crystal clear thermal imaging. Could see individual heat signatures from 2 miles out. 25 minutes. I thought watching his team pack their gear. Professional installation, 0 trace. Kendrick's team moves like they're still running military ops. Kendrick shook my hand in the darkness. No words, just the silent understanding between 2 men who'd seen enough courtrooms to know that justice sometimes requires operating outside official channels. 15 years ago, I'd prevented a wrongful manslaughter conviction from destroying his nephew's life. 22-year-old kid in the wrong place when a bar fight turned fatal. Prosecutor wanted someone to blame. I reviewed the evidence, found the Holes testified as expert witness. Kid walked free. Tonight, Kendrick returned the favor. The team disappeared into November darkness as silently as they'd come. I locked the back door, checked the living room. Pristine. No trace they'd ever been here. Complete coverage. I thought, scrolling through the tablet feeds. Every entrance, every approach. When Garrett comes back, we'll have him on thermal from 2 miles out. 11:45 p.m. The tablet vibrated. Alert vehicle detected. 2 miles. Thermal camera showing Garrett's car approaching through heavy snowfall. Headlights cutting through the storm. I had maybe 3 minutes. Stripped to thin cotton pajamas. No coat. No shoes. No socks. Walked to the back door. Opened it. -8 degrees Celsius. Heavy snow. Wind that cut through cotton like knives. I stepped barefoot onto frozen gravel. Pain shot through my feet immediately. November Vermont at midnight feels like walking on broken glass made of ice. I walked to the middle of the yard. raised my arms, began wailing. "Nora, Nora, where are you?" 30 seconds. That's how long I had to establish the scene before their headlights swept the driveway. "Don't go too far. It's getting dark." My feet were already going numb. Good. That would make the stumbling more authentic. Headlights appeared. Garrett's BMW sliding slightly on the snowy drive. I kept my arms outstretched, kept wailing. "Nora, I can't find you. It's so cold. Please come back." The car stopped. Doors opened. Garrett's voice sharp with excitement. "Jesus Christ, Simone, look at him. He's completely gone. This is perfect. The doctors will see this and there's no question." I heard the click, saw the smartphone screen light up. He was filming. Film it all, Garrett. Get every second. Because the thermal cameras outside just recorded you arriving after I was already in the snow. Premeditation proven. Standing in that snow barefoot and wailing for my dead wife while Garrett filmed me like a specimen. I was a baited hook and he was swallowing it whole. Simone's voice carried pure fury. "What the hell is he doing out here? I was in the middle of a Boston meeting. This better be worth dragging me back." She grabbed my arm, yanked me toward the house. "Get inside, you stupid old man. You'll freeze to death." Dragged me across the gravel. My feet left blood on the snow, small cuts from the frozen stones. Perfect detail for Garrett's video. Inside, she shoved me onto the sofa, pulled a pill from her purse, forced it into my mouth. "Take it, now." I sucked the pill against my cheek, pretended to swallow. She watched my throat. I forced a fake swallow motion. Satisfied, she turned to Garrett. "You got the video?" "Every second," Garrett said, still holding his phone. Wandering in a snowstorm at midnight. Calling for his dead wife. Hypothermic. This is exactly what we needed. They looked around the living room, checking, making sure nothing was out of place. The room was pristine. No trace of the 25-minute installation, completed 1 hour earlier. I sat there trembling, genuinely now hypothermia setting in, and performed my confusion. Where's Nora?" "She's gone, Dad," Garrett said, putting away his phone. "She's been gone 2 years. You're getting worse. I was looking for her." "We know. That's why we're getting you help. Professional help." They left 20 minutes later. Garrett still reviewing the video on his phone as he walked to the car. Simone already on her phone making calls. I waited until their taillights disappeared. Then I checked the tablet, pulled up the thermal footage. There, clear as crystal. Timestamp, 11:43 p.m. I walk out the back door, stand in the yard, raise my arms. Timestamp, 11:45 p.m. Garrett's car enters the driveway. 2 minutes. The thermal cameras recorded the full sequence. I walked outside before they arrived. 30 seconds of preparation. Then their headlights appeared exactly when the tablet said they would. Garrett's video showed a delusional old man wandering in the snow. My thermal footage showed a calculated performance timed to the second. I lay on the sofa after they left, warming my frozen feet, listening to Garrett's car fade down the driveway. He thought he'd just captured devastating proof of my mental collapse, me wandering delirious in a snowstorm calling for my dead wife. He didn't know the thermal cameras had recorded me walking outside 30 seconds before his headlights appeared. His video would prove my madness, mine would prove his fraud. Wednesday morning proved that dueling videos weren't enough. I needed to force Garrett's timeline to collapse. Desmond's encrypted call came at 9 Wednesday morning. "Floyd, they filed 3 days ago. You have 48 hours. His voice carried that lawyer's precision that meant catastrophic news delivered calmly. I sat down at the kitchen table, put the phone on speaker. Talk. Conservatorship petition, filed Monday. Emergency ex parte hearing scheduled Friday 2 p.m. Judge Theron Lockwood presiding. Closed proceeding. 48 hours. Not the 2 weeks Desmond had predicted. They'd accelerated everything. Desmond continued without pause. The IP tracker worked. Garrett's firm accessed your fake documents from 3 locations over the past week. They transmitted copies to the mining corporation Tuesday morning. Boston Mineral Holdings is already processing environmental permits based on forged power of attorney. Psychiatrists, I asked. Two of them, Dr. Anthony Moretti and Dr. Sarah Castellano, both out of state. Both signed affidavits declaring you mentally incompetent. Desmond slid papers across an encrypted tablet connection. I could see the documents on my screen. Psychiatric affidavits. Two doctors I'd never met. Dr. Moretti claims he evaluated you November 15th for 2 hours, Desmond said. Observed severe cognitive decline. Recommends immediate intervention. November 15th, the day I'd driven to Albany. Irving's lab. 4 hours of mountain roads. I was at Irving's lab that entire afternoon, I said. I know. That's textbook fraud. Both doctors were paid $100,000 each. Wire transfers from an offshore account registered to Simone. $100,000 per doctor. $200,000 total for lies on letterhead. Desmond slides the psychiatric affidavits across the table. Two doctors I've never met, swearing under oath. They evaluated me for hours, observed severe cognitive decline, recommend immediate intervention. Legal fiction dressed as medical fact. Simone's offshore accounts, Desmond continued. My forensic team found deposits totaling $2.4 million over 18 months, structured as consulting fees to avoid reporting requirements. All coming from the mining corporation, advance payments for mineral rights that don't exist yet. $2.4 million. Simone had been collecting payoffs for a year and a half. The hearing format, I asked. Closed proceeding. They'll present the psychiatric evidence. The video Garrett filmed of you in the snow. Financial documentation showing you can't manage your affairs. Judge Lockwood will ask you basic questions, date, location, simple memory tests. If you fail, conservatorship granted same day. And they've designed it so I will fail, I said. Yes. The haloperidol in your system, if you were still taking it, would make coherent answers nearly impossible. They need you declared Friday. Saturday, the Maple Forest sale completes. By Monday, you're in assisted living, and they're $9 million richer. 48 hours. Not the 2 weeks Desmond predicted. They'd accelerated everything after I took the bait with the fake documents. Garrett thought I was unraveling. Time to prove him right in ways he'd never expect. Friday, 2 p.m., I repeated. Judge Lockwood. Yes, Floyd, this timeline is catastrophic. We need to... I'll handle it, I said. Keep the evidence secure. I'm going to force their hand. I ended the call. Sat there looking at the psychiatric affidavits on the screen. Two strangers swearing I was incompetent. $200,000 in bribes. Friday deadline looming. Time to give Garrett something he couldn't ignore. Before I reveal the strategy I used to corner Garrett before Friday's hearing. If you're still with me, comment. A, if you think my next move will force his hand. Or B, if he's already prepared a countermove. I can't see. Add one short reason. Please note what follows includes some fictionalized details added for narrative depth and emotional impact. 10:45 a.m. I picked up the kitchen landline. Let my hand tremble slightly, old habit from the performance. Dialed Garrett's cell. He answered on the third ring. Background noise, office sounds, other voices. Dad, is everything okay? My voice came out tired, slightly confused. Exactly the tone he expected. Garrett, I've been thinking. About the farm. About what Nora would want. Pause. I heard him move to somewhere quieter. What about it, Dad? The Vermont State Orphan Fund, I said. Nora always said we should think of the children. All 12 million. I'm donating it. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Silence. Complete silence. Then his voice trying to stay calm. Dad, that's a big decision. Very big. Why don't I come up today? We can talk it through. Nothing to discuss, son. Lawyer's expecting me Monday. Paperwork's ready. Just need my signature. State Attorney's Office, 9 a.m. I could hear his breathing change. Hear the panic seeping in. The whole farm, he asked. The orchard, the forest, everything. Everything. $12 million. For the children. It's what Nora would want. Better than leaving it to ungrateful family who never visits. Background sounds, Simone's voice urgent whisper. Garrett had put me on speaker. Dad, please. Wait until next week. Just wait. Let's talk about this. My mind's made up, I said, voice trembling with false emotion. Monday morning. The orphans need it more than you do. Please, Dad. I hung up. Set the phone down with exaggerated care, hands still trembling from the performance. I'd given them an impossible choice: let me donate everything Monday, or accelerate their conservatorship play before Friday's hearing. Either way, they'd have to act desperately. Desperate people make mistakes. And Judge Lockwood's courtroom had cameras. Floyd hangs up the phone, with exaggerated care, hands still trembling from the performance. Through the window, he watches a cardinal land on Nora's bird feeder. Monday's donation is fiction. Friday's hearing is real. And Garrett just took the bait. I sat in the living room after hanging up, watching December light paint the orchard gold. Garrett would call Simone within 30 seconds. They'd realize Monday's donation killed their entire plan unless they acted before Friday's hearing. They'd have to accelerate, get sloppy, reveal themselves. I smiled at Nora's photograph on the mantel. I'm controlling the pace now, I whispered. Just like you taught me. Garrett didn't wait long to take the bait. 90 minutes, that's all the time he needed to panic and drive north. Garrett's rental sedan pulled into the driveway at 7 that evening, 90 minutes after our phone call about the orphan fund. I heard the engine. Saw the headlights sweep across the living room wall. Checked the voice recorder in my cardigan pocket. Recording light active. He came alone. No Simone. That meant she was handling something else. Probably calling the psychiatrists. Maybe coordinating with the mining corporation. Division of labor in a conspiracy. I opened the door before he knocked. Dad? He looked exhausted, desperate. We need to talk. Come in, son. I just made coffee. We sat in the living room. Fireplace burning. December cold pressing against the windows. I poured coffee with deliberately trembling hands. Garrett leaned forward. Concerned son. Worried expression. Dad, this donation to the orphan fund, do you even know their financial structure? They've had 3 directors in 2 years. Your $12 million could disappear in administrative costs. 3 directors in 2 years. Specific information. He'd researched it. Probably within minutes of hanging up with me. Nora wanted the children. I let confusion cloud my face. She always said, I know, Dad, I know. But there are better ways. More efficient charities. Organizations that actually help kids instead of paying executive salaries. He pulled papers from his briefcase, laid them on the coffee table. I brought something for you to review. A property protection document. It just ensures the farm stays in family hands if anything happens to you. Basic estate planning. Sign it tonight and we can take our time finding the right charity. No rush. No Monday deadline. Property protection document. Translation, power of attorney. Sign over control, tonight. Cancel the Monday appointment. Let them proceed with Friday's conservatorship hearing without the donation complication. I let him talk, my hand shaking, as I held the mug, the digital recorder in my cardigan pocket, capturing every word, time-stamped, admissible, damning. The orphan fund, Garrett continued. They're under investigation. Did you know that financial irregularities? The state attorney general opened an inquiry last month. Your $12 million would get frozen in legal proceedings for years, under investigation. Probably true. He'd done his homework fast. I just want to do what Nora would want, I said, voice weak. I know, Dad, I know. But sign this first. Protect the estate. Then we'll find the perfect organization together. Something Nora would really love. He pushed the papers closer, pen already uncapped. I looked at the documents, didn't pick them up. I'm so tired, Garrett. Can we do this tomorrow? Frustration flickered across his face, quickly hidden. Tomorrow might be too late, Dad. The lawyers need this filed before the weekend. Just one signature. Right here, he pointed. The signature line. I picked up the pen. let it waver over the paper, then set it down. My hand is shaking too much tonight. Tomorrow, I promise. Garrett's jaw tightened, but he couldn't push harder without revealing desperation. Okay, Dad. Tomorrow, first thing, I'll come back at 8 a.m. He packed up the papers, left them on the table, stood to go. Get some rest, he said. Take your medication. You look tired. Translation, take the poison. Stay confused. Be ready to sign tomorrow. After he left, I sat there listening to his car fade down the driveway. Checked the recorder. Perfect audio quality. Every word captured. Thursday morning, 8 a.m., Desmond's secure tablet pinged. Alert notification. Mining Corporation activity. I pulled up the encrypted message. Mining Corporation flagged anomalies in transferred documents. Bank routing numbers don't match their verification system. They've demanded Garrett produce original signed documents within 48 hours, or the sale agreement is void. 48 hours. The fake documents I'd planted were unraveling exactly as planned. I called Desmond on the burner phone. The Mining Corporation detected the forgeries, I said. Yes. Their forensic accounting team found 3 separate inconsistencies. They're threatening to void the entire transaction and report fraud to authorities. Timeline, 48 hours to produce originals. If Garrett can't deliver by Saturday morning, they walk away and likely file criminal complaints. Saturday morning, 2 days. I looked at my calendar, counted the pressure points. Mining Corporation, 48 hours until fraud exposure. Boston Loan Sharks, 18 days until violent collection. Monday donation, 4 days until orphan fund transfer. Friday hearing, 1 day until conservatorship decision. 3 fronts, 3 deadlines, 1 architect. Boston debt collectors, I said. Any movement? They're calling Garrett hourly, Desmond said. My surveillance picked up 6 calls yesterday. The interest is compounding daily. He's drowning. And the conservatorship hearing, still scheduled Friday, 2 p.m. Judge Lockwood. Garrett hasn't canceled or postponed. He's committed, because he had no choice. The hearing was his only way out. Declare me incompetent, seize control of the estate, cancel the Monday donation, provide the Mining Corporation with legitimate documents, pay off Boston before they broke his legs. All of it hinged on Friday. All of it required me to fail mental competency tests in front of Judge Lockwood. The voice recorder captured everything last night, I said. Garrett trying to get me to sign power of attorney, pushing the property protection document, lying about the orphan fund investigation. Perfect, Desmond said. Add it to the evidence file. We're building an airtight conspiracy case. I ended the call and walked to the window. Thursday morning sun lit the orchard where Nora and I had planted our first trees 40 years ago. Garrett had 48 hours before the Mining Corporation exposed his fraud. 18 days before Boston sent enforcers. 4 days before Monday's donation became real. 1 day before Friday's hearing decided everything. Every clock I'd set was ticking. Boston Loan Sharks, I said aloud to the empty office. Mining Corporation, Monday donation, 3 attacks at once. I smiled at Nora's photograph on the desk, all orchestrated by me. I switched off Desmond's tablet and walked to the window. Thursday morning sun lit the orchard, where Nora and I had planted our first trees 40 years ago. Garrett had 48 hours before the Mining Corporation, 18 days before Boston, 4 days before Monday's donation, 1 day before Friday's hearing. Every clock I'd set was ticking. Time to let them all go off at once. Friday morning, the clocks all stopped. Garrett pulled the trigger on his timeline and walked directly into mine. 2 county police cruisers and a white social services van appeared through Friday morning snow at 7:30, exactly when emergency ex parte orders are served. I watched from the kitchen window, counted the vehicles, counted the people stepping out into December cold. 2 deputies, 1 social worker. Official business at dawn. They walked to the front door, knocked with that particular authority that means legal documents and no choice. I opened the door, let the cold in. Deputy Marcus Brennan, County Sheriff's Office, somewhere in his 40s, held up an envelope. Floyd Harrington. Yes, I have an emergency court order for you, sir. He handed me the envelope. County seal. Judge's signature. I opened it standing there in the doorway. Read the first paragraph. Emergency ex parte conservatorship order. Vermont Superior Court. Immediate psychiatric evaluation required. All legal rights suspended pending competency hearing. The woman stepped forward. Ann Caldwell, mid-50s, social services identification hanging from her neck. Mr. Harrington, this is an emergency ex parte conservatorship order. You're required to undergo immediate psychiatric evaluation. We're here to transport you to a licensed facility. I read the second paragraph. The legal language, the citation, Emergency Protection Act of 1998. Section 7A, Emergency Intervention Procedures. I'd written that law 26 years ago. Vermont State Capitol. 3 months of drafting. 40 hours of committee testimony. One final vote where the gavel slipped and cut my hand. Garrett had used my own law against me. Emergency Protection Act, I said slowly, looking up at Deputy Brennan. Section 7A, I understand. Caldwell's expression softened slightly. You're familiar with the statute. I wrote it, I said, 1998, to protect elderly victims. She blinked, not expecting that. But the order was the order. My authorship didn't matter. The law applied equally to everyone, including the man who drafted it. Do you need time to pack a bag? Caldwell asked. No, I'm ready. I grabbed my oldest hat from the hook by the door. My heaviest cardigan, the one with deep pockets. The burner phone sat in the right pocket. Fully charged. Desmond's number programmed. Headlights swept the driveway. Garrett's BMW, right on schedule. He parked. Simone climbed out first, ran toward us. Dad, tears already streaming. Performance ready. Dad, we're doing this for you. You'll get the help you need. She tried to hug me. I stood stiff, let her embrace air. Garrett approached more slowly. Concerned son. Devastated by necessity. The doctors will take good care of you, Dad. We'll visit every day. I looked at him. My son. Standing there in expensive wool coat and leather gloves while deputies loaded me into a social services van like cargo. I know what this is, I said quietly. I know exactly what you're doing. His face flickered. Uncertainty. Then the mask returned. You're confused, Dad. That's why you need help. I climbed into the van wearing my oldest hat and heaviest cardigan, the one with deep pockets where a small burner phone fits perfectly. Caldwell sat beside me. Deputy Brennan drove. The second cruiser followed as escort. 40 minutes to the psychiatric facility, through snow-covered Vermont roads, past towns I'd lived in for 72 years. I sat in the back seat and thought about 1998. Vermont State Capitol. Late autumn. The Elderly Protection Bill reaching final committee. I'd drafted it after prosecuting 3 cases where families had exploited aging parents, drained bank accounts, forged documents, left them helpless. The Emergency Protection Act was my answer. Fast intervention, court-ordered evaluation, protection within hours instead of weeks. But I'd also seen the danger. What if the law itself became a weapon? What if families used emergency orders not to protect but to steal? So I'd written in safeguards. Protections within the protections. Section 14. B. The medical fraud provision. I closed my eyes and recited it from memory. Word perfect after 26 years. Section 14B. Upon demonstration of medical fraud or falsified psychiatric evidence within 72 hours of order execution, said order shall be deemed void, ab initio void, from the beginning, and all rights immediately restored. 72 hours. Friday, 7:30 a.m. The order was executed. Monday, 7:30 a.m. 72 hours exactly. But Judge Lockwood's chambers didn't open until 8. That gave me a 30-minute window. Monday, 8 a.m. 72 and a half hours. Still within the statutory limit. Garrett had used my own law against me, a trap built from the architect's blueprints, not realizing I'd hidden an escape hatch in the foundation 26 years ago. I opened my eyes, looked at my right hand. The scar was still there. Pale Y shape running from wrist toward thumb. 26 years, and it hadn't faded. November 1998. The final vote. I'd been presiding. Brought the gavel down to close debate. But my hand was sweating, nervous about the bill's passage, and the gavel slipped. The edge caught my palm. Blood on the walnut handle. Blood on the voting sheet. They'd wanted to pause the session, get medical attention. I'd refused. Wrapped my hand in a handkerchief. Finished the vote. The Emergency Protection Act passed 23-7. Theron Lockwood had been there. Young attorney, maybe 30 years old, sitting in the gallery, watching Vermont legislative process. Learning. Observing. He'd approached me afterward. Asked about the blood on my hand. I'd shown him the cut. Told him some laws require sacrifice. He'd laughed. Said he'd remember that. 26 years later, he was Judge Theron Lockwood, presiding over the same court system, enforcing the same laws, including the one I'd bled for. The van pulled into the facility parking lot. Psychiatric Evaluation Center. Locked doors, barred windows, 72-hour hold. Caldwell opened the door. "Mr. Harrington, we're here." I stepped out into December cold, looked at the building, calculated. Friday, 7:30 a.m., order executed. Saturday. Sunday. Evaluation. Performance. Confusion acted for doctors who'd write reports for Garrett. Monday, 8 a.m. Judge Lockwood's chambers. Section 14B motion. Medical fraud evidence. Toxicology reports. Forged psychiatric affidavits. Voice recordings. Video proof. 72 hours to prove they'd lied. I had 72 and a half. I looked down at my right hand, at the pale Y-shaped scar where the gavel had slipped during the final vote in 1998. Theron Lockwood had been in the gallery that day, a young attorney watching Vermont's elderly protection law pass. He'd remember. Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. I'd walk into his chambers and show him that scar again. They came for me at 7:30 Friday morning, 2 uniformed officers with an emergency conservatorship order bearing Judge Theron Lockwood's signature. I recognized the legal framework immediately, the 1998 Vermont Emergency Protection Act. The law I'd personally drafted 28 years ago when I represented the state legislature as their primary legal consultant. The officers were professional, almost apologetic. The older one badge reading Kowalski held up the document. "Mr. Harrington, we have an order of temporary psychiatric evaluation. 72 hours at Riverside Behavioral Health Facility. Do you understand?" I let my shoulders slump, let confusion cloud my expression. Friday, is it Friday?" "Yes, sir." Kowalski exchanged a glance with his partner. "We'll give you a few minutes to pack a bag." Garrett and Simone arrived as the officers loaded me into their vehicle. Simone's performance was masterful. Tears streaming, voice breaking, as she called out, "Dad, it's for your safety. We love you." Garrett stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, his expression appropriately concerned. I watched them through the patrol car window, noting how quickly Simone's tears vanished once the officers closed my door. During the 40-minute drive, I ran the timeline in my head. Friday, 7:30 a.m. marked hour 0. Monday, 8 a.m. would be hour 72, the exact moment when Section 14B of my 1998 Act allowed the subject of an emergency order to present evidence of medical fraud and void the conservatorship. I'd written that loophole myself, buried it in subsection language that looked like procedural formality. They'd trapped me with my own law. Now I'd escape through the exit I'd built into it. Riverside Behavioral Health Facility smelled like institutional pine cleaner and defeat. Dr. Helena Mercer, the lead psychiatrist, was exactly what I'd expected, mid-50s wire-rimmed glasses, tablet computer clutched like a shield. She conducted the evaluation in a windowless office with beige walls and furniture designed to prevent self-harm. "Mr. Harrington, can you tell me what year it is?" I hesitated. Let my gaze wander to the acoustic ceiling tiles. It's 19... No, wait. 2000... I trailed off, shaking my head slowly. For 3 days, I performed cognitive decline with the precision of method acting. I forgot what I'd eaten for breakfast. I couldn't recall my children's birth years. I asked the same questions multiple times. Dr. Mercer documented everything her stylus scratching across her tablet screen. What she didn't know, what Garrett's $100,000 couldn't buy, was that I'd consulted on psychiatric evaluation protocols for the Vermont court system in 2003. I knew exactly which symptoms to fake and which tests to fail. Sunday afternoon, Simone visited. She brought cheap grocery store flowers, yellow carnations already wilting in their plastic sleeve. We sat in the facility's common room, a space designed for supervised family visits, cameras mounted in all 4 corners. She leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't resist tomorrow, Dad. It'll be easier if you cooperate. For everyone." I looked at her with watery eyes, my hands trembling slightly as I touched the carnations. "Tomorrow, the hearing." She patted my arm, her smile sharp. "Just let the lawyers handle everything." After she left, I shuffled back to my assigned room, a space barely larger than a prison cell, with a narrow bed and a single window overlooking the parking lot. I lay down, closed my eyes, and waited for the facility to settle into its night routine. At 11 o'clock, when the hallway monitoring switched to hourly checks, I retrieved the burner phone from where I'd hidden it inside the mattress seam during my first night. A trick I'd learned from a client in 1987. Behavioral facilities never checked inside institutional mattresses. I sent one text to Desmond, "Monday ready, execute all." His reply came 30 seconds later. "Confirmed, see you there." Monday morning, they dressed me for court. Simone had sent clothes in a labeled bag, worn flannel shirt with frayed collar, and one missing button, faded jeans with permanent grass stains, work boots so scratched they looked like I'd worn them for decades of farm labor, and an old cloth hat that smelled faintly of motor oil. The message was clear. Present me to Judge Lockwood as a declining farmer who couldn't manage his own affairs. Make me look helpless, confused, unworthy of autonomy. I put on every piece, studying my reflection in the facility bathroom's metal mirror. Perfect. Brenda Carver, the social services caseworker assigned to transport me, was younger than my grandchildren, 26 at most, with bright optimism that hadn't yet been crushed by bureaucratic reality. She helped me into her sedan with gentle hands. "Don't worry, Mr. Harrington. The judge will make sure you're taken care of." "Judge?" I let my voice quaver. "I have to see a judge. It's just a formality. Everything will be fine." The courthouse stood against the December morning sky like a monument to institutional power. White marble columns, Vermont state flag snapping in cold wind. Brenda guided me through the main entrance, past security, down a corridor, where court staff barely glanced at the confused old man shuffling in degrading clothes. Courtroom 3B. Garrett and Simone already seated in the second row, flanked by their attorney, in a suit worth more than most people's monthly rent. They watched me enter, and I saw the flash of satisfaction in Garrett's eyes as he took in my appearance. I shuffled to the defendant table, set down the old cloth hat, and lowered myself into the chair with exaggerated difficulty. Bowed my head, folded my gnarled hands. Through lowered eyes, I watched the courtroom clock tick to 8:15. 15 minutes past hour 72. Time to show Theron Lockwood that scar. At 9 o'clock, sharp, Garrett's attorney rose from the petitioner's table with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd already won. Miles Pemberton, early 50s, 3-piece charcoal suit, silver cufflinks catching the overhead lights, carried a leather portfolio to the podium, like it contained divine judgment rather than manufactured evidence. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth as courtroom marble, "the evidence before you is heartbreaking but unambiguous. Floyd Harrington suffers severe cognitive decline requiring immediate conservatorship intervention for his own protection." I kept my head bowed, shoulders slumped, hands folded over the old cloth hat. the posture of defeat. Pemberton opened his portfolio with practiced efficiency. I'll begin with the psychiatric evaluations. Dr. Helena Mercer and Dr. Raymond Cho, both board-certified specialists, conducted independent assessments. Their conclusions are identical and conclusive. He handed documents to the bailiff. Mr. Harrington demonstrates profound short-term memory impairment, temporal disorientation, and inability to manage basic financial decisions. Judge Lockwood accepted the papers, his expression professionally sympathetic as he scanned the affidavits. Behind me, I heard Garrett shift in his seat, probably suppressing a smile. Additionally, Pemberton continued, the family has provided video documentation of Mr. Harrington's declining state. With the court's permission, Lockwood nodded. Proceed. The bailiff dimmed the courtroom lights. A screen descended from the ceiling. The projection flickered to life, grainy night vision footage, timestamp reading December 1st, 11:07 p.m. The video showed our farmhouse porch, snow falling in thick curtains. Then I appeared shuffling down the steps in my bathrobe and slippers, arms outstretched, face turned to the storm. Nora, my voice called from the speakers, cracking with grief. Nora, where are you? Please, I can't find you. I wandered into the snow, stumbling, calling my dead wife's name over and over. The courtroom sat in absolute silence. On screen, headlights swept across the frame, Garrett's truck arriving. My son rushed out, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders, guiding me back toward the house. The video ended. Lights came up. Pemberton let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, professional theater. Your Honor, this is not an isolated incident. Mr. Harrington's son has documented 17 similar episodes over the past 6 weeks. The respondent can no longer distinguish between past and present, between the living and the deceased. What Pemberton didn't know, what Garrett's $100,000 couldn't buy, was context. That video was a performance timed to the second. I'd walked outside exactly 30 seconds before Garrett's scheduled arrival. The thermal cameras I'd installed in October had captured the truth, me checking my watch on the porch, waiting for headlights, then beginning my snow-wandering act. But that evidence sat in Desmond's brown accordion file, not yet my turn to present it. Pemberton continued through his case bank statements, showing my supposed confusion testimony from Simone about my forgetfulness, medical records documenting my recent behavioral changes. 20 minutes of carefully constructed narrative designed to prove I was a danger to myself. Lockwood listened with the focused attention of someone who took conservatorship cases seriously. Good. Theron had always been thorough, even 25 years ago when he was just a young court clerk learning the system. Mr. Harrington, Lockwood said, when Pemberton finished, his voice gentle. Do you understand why you're here today? I lifted my head slowly, letting confusion cloud my expression. Is this about the property taxes? Garrett's attorney stepped in smoothly. Your Honor, as you can see, I can see clearly, Mr. Pemberton. Lockwood's tone carried a hint of steel. Mr. Harrington, you have the right to respond to these allegations. Do you wish to speak? This was it. Hour 73 of the Conservatorship Order. Section 14B of the 1998 Vermont Emergency Protection Act. The loophole I'd written into law during my final year on the bench allowed the subject of an emergency psychiatric hold to present evidence of medical fraud within the 72 to 96-hour window. I was past 72. I was inside 96. The door was open. I straightened my spine slowly, vertebra by vertebra, shedding the slumped posture like a costume. Reached down and picked up the black leather glove I'd placed on the defense table, the one piece Simone hadn't chosen from my degrading outfit. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled the glove onto my left hand. Then I raised my right hand, still bare, into the light. The scar caught the fluorescent glow, pale gray tissue running from my wrist, down across my palm in a perfect Y shape. Raised, unmistakable, 25 years old. Judge Lockwood's eyes tracked to my hand. I watched his expression shift, professional attention. becoming focused, scrutiny, becoming sudden, shocked recognition. His face went pale. The gavel slipped from his fingers, hitting the bench with a sharp crack. "That scar," he said, voice barely above a whisper. He stood, one hand gripping the bench edge. "Judge Harrington, is it really you?" Behind me, Garrett's satisfied expression vanished. I heard Simone's sharp intake of breath. I met Lockwood's eyes, the same brown eyes that had looked up at me from a courtroom floor in Boston, 1999, when I'd stepped between him and a gang member's knife during a courthouse riot. When I'd taken the blade meant for a 28-year-old court clerk who'd been in the wrong hallway at the wrong time. "It's been 25 years, Theron," I said, my voice clear and steady, no tremor, no confusion, no decline. "Do you still remember the Boston gang's knife?" Lockwood stood completely still, one hand moving unconsciously to his chest, the spot where the blade would have gone if I hadn't intercepted it. His eyes moved from my scar to my face to Garrett's frozen expression. "I'm looking," he said, voice breaking, "at the person who saved my life." The courtroom held its breath. Pemberton stood motionless at the podium, portfolio forgotten. Garrett gripped the pew rail, knuckles white. Simone's hand found her husband's arm. I kept my right hand raised, the Y-shaped scar visible to everyone. "Your Honor," I said quietly, "I invoke Section 14B of the 1998 Vermont Emergency Protection Act. I am past hour 72 of the emergency conservatorship order. I am within the 96-hour window, and I have evidence of systematic medical fraud." Lockwood's gavel lay on its side where it had fallen. His hand remained pressed against his chest, against the place where a scar would have been if I hadn't taken the knife for him 25 years ago in a Boston courthouse hallway. The power in the room had shifted, and everyone knew it. Lockwood recovered his composure in seconds, 25 years, as a judge teaching him to separate personal history from courtroom procedure. He picked up his gavel, set it precisely in its rest, and met my eyes. "Permission granted," he said. "Present your evidence, Judge Harrington." The courtroom doors opened. Desmond Whitfield entered, 70 years old, but moving with purpose, wheeling a hand truck stacked with 6 banker's boxes. He positioned them beside the defense table without a word, then took a seat in the gallery's first row. I lifted the lid from box 1. "Toxicology report from Irving Frost, Vermont State Forensic Specialist." I handed the document to the bailiff. "Haloperidol detected at triple therapeutic dose in blood samples taken November 28th. Administered systematically over 6 weeks based on metabolite analysis." Lockwood scanned the report, his jaw tightening. Box 2. Credit card statements. Simone Harrington purchased haloperidol from 3 online pharmacies between October 15th and November 20th. Total quantity enough to dose someone daily for 8 weeks. Behind me, Simone made a small sound, half gasp, half denial. Box 3. Thermal imaging metadata from cameras my son installed around my property in October. These show him recording me on 17 occasions, always between 10 p.m. and midnight, always after he'd confirmed I'd consumed my evening tea. I pulled out an 8x10 photo thermal image showing Garrett crouched behind my woodshed with a professional camera rig, timestamp visible November 30th, 10:47 p.m. Box 4. IP tracker logs. The fabricated power of attorney documents I planted in my office safe were accessed from 3 locations within 12 hours: my son's law firm, his home network, and a commercial document service in Burlington that specializes in forgery. Pemberton Garrett's attorney had gone very still at his table. Box 5. Unauthorized maple forest sale documentation. My son forged my signature on September 23rd to sell 40 acres to a mining corporation for $2.3 million, 1/4 of market value. The sale was contingent on conservatorship approval by December 31st. I laid the mining contract on the evidence table. The corporation also holds his $8 million debt at 40% monthly interest. This conservatorship was designed to save my son from loan sharks by sacrificing my land. Lockwood's expression had moved past professional neutrality into barely contained anger. Box 6. Financial records showing that both psychiatrists who declared me incompetent received $100,000 each from accounts in Simone Harrington's name. The transfers occurred on November 21st, 4 days before their supposedly independent evaluations. I paused, then added quietly, "Your Honor, at 7:45 this morning, Captain Kendrick Stafford of the Vermont State Police executed arrest warrants issued yesterday by Judge Patricia Owens of Burlington District Court for Dr. Helena Mercer and Dr. Raymond Cho. Both were taken into custody in this courthouse's lobby approximately 18 minutes ago. The bailiff can confirm." Lockwood turned to his bailiff. "Verify that." The bailiff stepped out, returned 90 seconds later. "Confirmed, Your Honor. Both doctors taken into custody at 9:12 this morning. State Police Fraud Division." The courtroom went absolutely silent. Pemberton closed his briefcase with a soft click and stood. "Your Honor, I move to withdraw from this case effective immediately." Lockwood didn't look at him. "Granted. You may leave." Garrett sat alone now, his expensive attorney walking out without a backward glance. I pulled out one more item, a thumb drive. "Your Honor, this contains the original unedited recording from December 1st. The video Mr. Pemberton presented was 4 minutes edited down to 20 seconds. Lockwood gestured to the court technician Dennis Walsh, mid-40s, the AV specialist assigned to courtroom 3B. Walsh loaded the file, and the screen flickered to life. My voice came through the speakers, clear and measured. "Vermont Criminal Statute, Section 13. Any person who knowingly administers a controlled substance to an individual without their informed consent commits elder abuse in the first degree, punishable by 10 to 20 years imprisonment and restitution of all financial damages." On screen, I stood on my porch in my bathrobe, speaking directly to the camera hidden in my barn eave, the one Garrett didn't know about. Then I checked my watch, walked down the steps, and began my Nora wailing performance exactly 30 seconds before Garrett's headlights appeared. The full video ran 4 minutes. The version Pemberton had presented showed only the final 20 seconds. Walsh examined the files side by side. "Your Honor, the video presented earlier shows clear splice marks. 4 minutes removed timestamp manipulation confirmed. This is the original source file." Garrett stood suddenly, hands gripping the pew rail. His voice came out strangled, desperate. "Your Honor, I want to testify. It was Simone. She masterminded everything. I only followed orders. She told me it was the only way to save the farm, to protect Dad from himself. I did what she said." Simone's head snapped toward her husband, her face bone white. "You're lying. She bought the drugs," Garrett shouted. "She measured the doses. She put it in his tea. I just recorded what she told me to record." Lockwood's gavel came down like a gunshot. "Enough!" He stood, and the courtroom seemed to shrink around his anger. "Conservatorship order vacated. The respondent, Floyd Harrington, is hereby restored to full legal capacity and control of all assets." His voice dropped, went cold. "Bench warrants issued conspiracy to commit elder abuse, forgery, fraud, and administering controlled substances with intent to harm. Bailiff, take them both into custody." 2 deputies moved in. Garrett tried to run, actually bolted toward the rear exit, but got 3 steps before a deputy caught his arm and forced him against the wall. The handcuffs clicked shut. Simone sat frozen at the petitioner's table as the other deputy approached. She didn't resist as he cuffed her wrists behind her back. They led her past me toward the courthouse hallway. Just before the doorway, she dropped to her knees, hands cuffed behind her, and grabbed at my boot with her shoulder. "Dad," she sobbed. "Please, I'm your daughter. I'm family." I looked down at her without bending. The same face that had smiled while serving poisoned tea. The same voice that had whispered threats in the behavioral facility. "You chose this," I said, voice flat and final. "The day you put that vial on my kitchen counter, I chose what comes next." I stepped around her and walked toward the courthouse doors. Behind me, the deputy helped her to her feet. Her sobs echoed down the marble corridor, pleading, then angry, then silent, as I pushed through the exit. December morning light hit my face. Cold, clean, real. Someone, a reporter maybe, or just a courthouse observer, asked what I felt. I looked across the street at Vermont snow covering the orchard I'd saved. The maple forest that would stay in my hands. The land Nora and I had built together. Just snow, I said, and cold, and freedom. 3 days after walking out of that courtroom, I sat across from Desmond in his Burlington office while he spread 8 manila folders across the mahogany desk. December afternoon light slanted through Venetian blinds, cutting the folders into strips of shadow and revelation. Each one, Desmond said, tapping the first folder, represents another piece of their conspiracy falling apart. Folder 1, Dr. Helena Mercer. Took a plea deal this morning. 18 months federal prison, permanent surrender of medical license. The state medical board revoked her credentials before the ink dried. Folder 2. Dr. Raymond Cho. 24 months. Same terms. He tried to claim ignorance about the payment source, but his bank records showed 3 separate deposits totaling the full amount within 48 hours of signing your evaluation. I said nothing. Just watched Desmond work through the systematic destruction I'd engineered. Folder 3, Mining Corporation lawsuit. Their legal team discovered the fabricated power of attorney during standard due diligence after they'd already invested in environmental surveys, geological testing, and regulatory filings. They've countersued Garrett for $4.2 million in costs. He doesn't have $4.2 million, I observed. Desmond smiled thinly. No. But the judgment will follow him for 20 years. They'll garnish every dollar he earns after prison release. Folder 4 made me lean forward. The Boston debt. FBI seized all documentation when they arrested Garrett. Turns out the loan sharks used your farm as collateral on documents Garrett forged, your signature, fabricated notary stamps, the works. Federal prosecutors are charging the lenders with racketeering and conspiracy to commit fraud. The entire $8 million claim is legally void. I felt something unlock in my chest, the weight I'd carried since Garrett first mentioned Boston, since I'd understood my son had gambled away more money than most people earned in lifetimes, and tried to mortgage my land to save himself. Void, I repeated, without legal standing. They have no claim to your property, never did. And now they're facing 20 years federal time for attempting to collect on fraudulent debt instruments. Folders 5 through 8 detailed smaller pieces, Simone's offshore accounts frozen and seized for victim restitution, Garrett's law license permanently revoked, the Maple Forest sale agreement, declared void ab initio property, titles re-recorded in my name alone with enhanced fraud protections. 8 folders, 8 dominoes, all falling in perfect sequence from the moment I'd pretended to swallow that first pill. Desmond closed the last folder. Your farm is completely secure. $12 million in land, $9 million in Maple Forest timber rights. No liens, no claims, no threats. And no family, I said quietly. Desmond didn't answer. There was nothing to say. 8 weeks later, I sat in the same Burlington courtroom, where Judge Lockwood had recognized my scar. Late January afternoon, weak winter sun filtering through high windows. The gallery was nearly empty, a few reporters, 2 federal agents, Desmond beside me in the witness section. Garrett entered first, hands cuffed, wearing county orange instead of his custom suits. He'd lost weight. His attorney, court-appointed this time, not $1,000 an hour, Miles Pemberton, guided him to the defendant table. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ellen Driscoll stood at the prosecutor's table, early 40s, gray suit, the efficient competence of someone who'd built her career on elder exploitation cases. She'd told me during our pre-trial meeting that Garrett's case was textbook family member forged documents, vulnerable victim, clear financial motive. Lockwood entered. We all rose. Mr. Garrett Harrington, Lockwood said, his voice carrying none of the warmth he'd shown me. You have entered guilty pleas to wire fraud, elder financial exploitation, and conspiracy to defraud. The court accepts these pleas. He paused, looking down at the sentencing report. 12 years federal incarceration. Restitution in the amount of $4.2 million to Berkshire Mining Corporation. permanent revocation of law license. Supervised release for 5 years following incarceration. Garrett's shoulders sagged. His attorney touched his arm, professional comfort, nothing personal. They let him out through the side door. He didn't look at me. 12 years for trying to steal what he would have inherited anyway, if he'd simply waited, if he'd valued patience over greed. Simone came next, escorted by 2 female deputies. She'd aged a decade in 8 weeks, hair gone gray at the roots, face-drawn hands trembling as they uncuffed her for the hearing. Driscoll stood. "Your Honor, the defendant pleaded guilty to administering controlled substances without consent. However, evidence provided by Vermont state toxicologist Irving Frost demonstrates systematic dosage escalation over 6 weeks, beginning at therapeutic levels and tripling by week 5. This pattern supports enhancement to attempted harm under Vermont Criminal Code Section 13B. Lockwood reviewed the toxicology charts Irving had prepared. The same charts that showed how Simone had grown bolder, more confident, increasing the dose as I appeared to decline further. She'd escalated because she thought it was working. She never knew I was spitting out the pills, collecting evidence, letting her build her own prosecution. "Enhancement granted," Lockwood said. "Mrs. Simone Harrington, 8 years state prison. All personal property forfeited to Victim Restitution Fund. Maple Forest sale agreement declared void ab initio without legal standing from inception." Simone made a sound, half sob, half collapse. The deputies caught her arms, held her upright. I watched them lead her out. Watched the courtroom empty. Watched Lockwood gather his papers and leave the bench. Desmond and I walked out together into late January afternoon. The snow that had been falling in December had melted to slush running down courthouse steps in thin streams. Spring wasn't here yet, but winter was losing its grip. A reporter young woman with a digital recorder asked if I felt vindicated. I looked at the water running down marble steps, carrying away the last of winter. The orchard and forest were safe. The farm was mine. Nora's grave would never be sold to strangers. But Nora was still gone, and now Garrett and Simone were gone too, and I'd won everything except the people who should have mattered. "Burlington snow melting in first January sunshine," I said. "That's what I feel." The trust documents covered Desmond's desk in precise rows, 72 pages, transferring $21 million in Vermont farmland to children I'd never meet. 3 weeks had passed since the sentencing. Winter was losing its grip on Burlington, but the papers in front of me promised something that would outlast every season permanence. "Page 64, Desmond said, sliding the document toward me. "This establishes perpetual trust status. No heir creditor or court order can dissolve it. The land is permanently removed from private ownership." I read the clause twice. Vermont State Orphan Children's Trust. The $12 million orchard Nora had planted row by row. The $9 million maple forest that had stood for generations. All of it transformed from inheritance weapon into sanctuary. Judge Theron Lockwood sat across from Desmond, his role today ceremonial but significant honorary chairman of the trust board. He'd agreed immediately when I'd asked, understanding, without explanation, why I needed someone I could trust to steward what Nora and I had built. "Lifetime residence and management rights," Desmond continued, pointing to page 17. "You retain full authority to live on the property and manage operations, but ownership transfers to the trust upon signature. After your death, the land serves orphaned children in perpetuity." I picked up the pen. 42 signatures across 72 pages, each one removing another piece of my estate from the reach of family greed. The donation I'd threatened to make in November, the bait that had forced Garrett into panicked mistakes, that had exposed his desperation to Judge Lockwood, was becoming real. Except now it wasn't strategy. It was permanence. I signed the final page and set down the pen. Lockwood extended his hand across the desk. "Floyd serving as honorary chairman. It's an honor. This is what Nora would want." I shook his hand, feeling the weight of what we'd just made inviolable. the orchard she planted, the forest she loved. Let orphans have what my own son tried to steal. Desmond gathered the documents into a leather portfolio. I'll file these with the state by end of business today. By 5 p.m., the Vermont State Orphan Children's Trust will own $21 million in protected farmland. 72 pages, 42 signatures, $21 million transformed from inheritance weapon into permanent sanctuary. I looked out Desmond's window at Burlington's snow-covered streets. Somewhere in federal prison, Garrett was learning what 12 years felt like. Somewhere in state prison, Simone was serving 8 years for escalating doses of poison she'd thought were breaking my mind. And here in a lawyer's office, their intended victim had just made certain neither of them nor any future heir could ever touch the land they'd tried to steal. 3 nights later, I sat at my farmhouse desk with 2 pieces of cream stationery and Nora's fountain pen. The kind of writing that required hand and intention, not keyboard and speed. The first letter took 20 minutes to compose. Dear Irving, your toxicology report documented 6 weeks of haloperidol administration with medical precision. But the dosage escalation timeline showing systematic increases from therapeutic to triple strength, that analysis was unsolicited. You understood it would convert standard drug administration into attempted harm. 8 years instead of 3. Justice measured in milligrams. Your expertise gave me the evidence that proved not just what they did, but how deliberately they escalated. Thank you for seeing what I needed before I knew to ask. With gratitude, Floyd Harrington. The second letter came slower, each word chosen with the same care Irving had used measuring poison metabolites. Dear Kendrick, the Boston security contractor who installed thermal surveillance under a false consulting contract. Midnight cameras positioned to capture every approach, every recording time-stamped and admissible. You asked no questions when I hired you. In September, demanded no explanations when I requested specific angles and activation parameters. Flawless execution from a man who understood what silence protects. Your work provided irrefutable evidence of 17 staged recordings. Thank you for your discretion and your precision. With gratitude. Floyd Harrington. I set both letters on the desk and walked to the bookshelf where Nora's wedding album sat between legal treatises and farm management guides. Between pages of photographs from 1977, Nora, in her simple white dress, me in my only suit, both of us standing under the maple sapling we'd planted that April. Pressed maple leaves lay preserved in wax paper. 80 years old now, that tree. The leaves I'd collected last October before everything began, when I'd still hoped Garrett might choose differently. I placed one leaf in each envelope. The edges crumbled slightly as I slid them in fragile, preserved from the tree. Nora had insisted on planting our first spring together, even though I'd said it would take decades to mature. We're planting it for the future, she'd said, hands covered in Vermont soil. Not for us, for what comes after. The maple was 80 years old when she died. 80 years old when Garrett tried to sell it to mining corporations. 80 years old when I signed it over to orphans who would climb its branches and collect its sap, and never know the woman who'd planted it. I sealed both envelopes without return address, just Irving's name and Kendrick's name in careful script. No further explanation needed. The leaves said what words couldn't. This came from something that endured. I carried both letters to the kitchen table and set them beside Nora's photograph. The one from our 40th anniversary, her smile still bright, despite the cancer we'd already known was coming. 2 letters. 2 leaves. 2 men who'd helped me win a war I'd never wanted to fight. Outside, February wind moved through bare orchard branches. In April, they'd bloom again, white blossoms covering 3 acres like snow in sunshine. Apples would come in September. Maple sap would flow in March. For orphans now, for Nora's memory. Not for blood. 5 a.m. Coffee. On the farmhouse porch. The first morning. In 3 months, my hand didn't shake from strategy, only from March cold. I wrapped both palms around the ceramic mug, letting heat seep into 72-year-old joints, and watched dawn break over Vermont snow that had finally begun its seasonal surrender. Judge's coffee, Judge's hour, Judge's silence. But farmer's land now. Nora's legacy. Not mine to own, mine to protect. The mug sat steady in my grip. No tremor, no performance. For 12 weeks, I'd controlled every muscle, every expression, every word, to maintain the illusion of decline while building the evidence of conspiracy. Now the trial was over, the sentences delivered, the trust documents filed. The only person I needed to be was myself. The trembling had stopped. Not because I'd willed it, because I didn't need to perform anymore. I looked across the property at the maple forest, where 80-year-old trees stood unchanged by human betrayal. The same trees that had weathered 70 Vermont winters before Garrett was born. The same trees that would weather 70 more after I was gone. Somewhere in federal prison, my son was learning to count time in years instead of billing hours. Somewhere in state prison, my daughter-in-law was discovering what 8 years felt like when measured in missed seasons. But I didn't think about their sentences this morning. I thought about Nora not with the sharp pain of November, when grief had been my only companion, but with gratitude for what she'd planted that outlasted us both. "You would have liked this," I whispered to the dawn. "The orphans getting what our son tried to steal." The wind carried my words into the orchard. No answer came back. None was needed. I finished my coffee as sunrise turned snow to gold, then walked down porch steps into March morning. My boots crunched through crust that would be mud by afternoon spring's first promise, hidden beneath winter's last stand. I walked through the maple forest to its furthest corner, where Nora's first tree stood. We'd planted it together the April after our wedding, 1977, both of us young enough to believe 80 years was forever. She'd insisted on this exact spot, corner property, maximum sunlight room, to grow without crowding. "We're planting it for the future," she'd said, hands deep in Vermont soil. I stood beneath its bare canopy, now looking up at branches that would leaf out in 6 weeks. My right hand rose without conscious thought, pressed against rough bark, Y-shaped scar meeting maple surface. This scar had saved Judge Theron Lockwood 25 years ago in a Boston courthouse hallway. Had saved me 3 months ago in a Burlington courtroom when recognition replaced routine and personal history transformed legal proceeding. Now it just touched wood that Nora had planted when we were young. I stood there 1 full minute, measuring what endures against what falls. 80 years this tree had stood. Would stand 80 more. I'd see maybe 15 if genetics were kind, 20 if luck held. Enough! What remains when victory costs you your only son, when justice means destroying your own blood? When you win every battle, but lose every person who should have mattered. This tree, this land, this gift to children who would climb these branches and collect this sap and never know the woman who'd planted it, or the man who'd fought to keep it. "The land outlasts the man," I said quietly to the maple. "The gift outlasts the giver. That's what you taught me, Nora." I turned toward the farmhouse, leaving my hands warmth on bark that didn't need it. At midday, I sat at my desk in March light that slanted through windows Nora had insisted on enlarging in 1983. The black leather notebook sat in front of me, the one I'd begun the day after Garrett's first foreclosure call, when I'd understood that documentation would be survival. I opened it to the first page. November 1st, 2024. First pill. Simone served tea with distinctive bitter aftertaste. Pretended to swallow, spat into handkerchief when she left room. Residue sent to Irving by 6 p.m. I turned pages slowly. November 8th, wax impression of office safe lock 2 minutes while Garrett used bathroom. November 15th, Albany, 4 hours purchased IP tracker software. November 22nd, thermal camera footage confirmed Garrett recording me 17 nights, always post tea. Every date. every dosage, every conversation recorded, every piece of evidence assembled across 3 months of calculated survival. Every weapon I'd forged in silence while they thought I was losing my mind. I reached the final page, blank except for today's date written in the top corner, March 6th, 2025. One sentence, one pen stroke. 30 years of judicial habit captured in 14 words. I wrote in the same careful script I'd used for 3 decades of legal opinions. They thought I was an old man who didn't remember anything. They forgot I spent 30 years trying never to forget. I set down the pen and read the line twice. Then I closed the notebook, feeling its weight, not just leather and paper, but evidence and victory and family destroyed in the name of principle preserved. I opened the bottom desk drawer, placed the notebook inside, locked it, and pocketed the key. Done, filed, locked, like every case I'd ever closed. Except this one, I'd had to be both judge and defendant. I stood and walked to the window. Outside Nora's orchard waited for April bloom, 3 acres of trees that would produce apples for children. I'd never meet, growing on land I'd never own, protected by laws I'd once written, and a trust I'd signed away. Garrett had tried to steal it with forged documents and fabricated diagnoses. Simone had tried to poison my mind to steal my land. Both had seen a forgetful old farmer, vulnerable and declining. Neither had recognized the judge who'd spent 3 decades training memory, like a muscle documentation, like a weapon, patience, like a long game played across years instead of months. The irony would have made Nora laugh, her grieving widower targeted as weak, revealing himself as the strategist who'd once written the very laws his conspirators tried to exploit. It made me smile, not triumph, not vindication, just the quiet satisfaction of work completed and legacy preserved. I touched the window glass, cold against my palm. Outside, March wind moved through bare branches that would bloom an April leaf in May fruit in September. For orphans, for Nora's memory, for what endures when the people who should have cherished it choose greed instead. The sun was setting now, turning snow to amber and shadows to indigo. My reflection stared back from darkening glass, 72 years old, alone, victorious, bereaved. But the orchard would bloom, and that finally was enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The people who should protect you can sometimes be the ones you need protection from. Looking back, my mistake wasn't trusting my son, it was ignoring the small signs that something had changed in him. The late-night visits, the 2 specific questions about my finances. I wanted to believe family meant loyalty, but being a revenge dad taught me that sometimes family justice means standing alone against your own blood, even when it breaks your heart. What I learned is this: document everything. Trust your instincts when behavior doesn't match words. Seeking family justice isn't about hatred, it's about protecting what's right. When you're a revenge dad fighting those who should have loved you, the path gets lonely. But I believe God gives us the strength to stand firm when everything tells us to give in. The truth always surfaces, even when it takes months of patience to bring it to light. If this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave a comment. What would you have done in my position? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Dad Returns for more stories about standing strong when family tests you. Your support truly matters. Thank you for staying until the very end. I read every comment you leave. Just a reminder, while this story draws from real experiences, certain details have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling. What matters is the lesson we can all carry forward.